Vacation, but her smile's on cue. Korean wants a job with Whoopi on The View. Oh, oh, oh. Korean wants a job with Whoopi on The View. Oh, oh, oh. Korean wants a job with Whoopi on The View.
Hey, John, good morning. Barry in Andover. So, watching TV, seeing the commercials, I thought it'd be interesting to see what an update.
Well, that didn't work. Why is it not playing where I need it to play? This is what I get for not testing things ahead of time. You see, that's what happens when you get overconfident. So Devin is producing the show this morning. It is the Jon Justice Show presented by American Experiment. So this is Devin's first official day solo producing on the show. He's done absolutely nothing wrong. He's got everything set up the way that it needs to be set up. I got everything connected the way that it needed to be connected, and I got overconfident. I got overconfident. Because I went and I restarted my laptop from yesterday that I used to play the blast. But unfortunately, in doing so, I disconnected the way that you, who have decided to join me at this early hour.
Hey, John, good morning. Barry in Andover.
Yeah,
So, watching TV, seeing the commercials, I thought it'd be interesting to see what an update is on the polling, what that's looking like. And then a reminder to everybody who would be leaving a blast. There are options on the keypad. If you don't like your message, go back and redo it and maybe go through that a little bit. Thanks. Have a great day.
Yeah, there you go. So Barry in Andover has some helpful hints as we kick off today's show. If you would like to leave a comment, 612-584-4565. That is the blaster line. You can, of course, email as well. Jon.justice@AmericanExperiment.org. We have another busy show today, and it's going to kind of be this way until Tuesday and primary day. So Kendall Qualls, the endorsed GOP gubernatorial candidate, he is slated to join us in studio coming up at 7:30. Policy fellow here at American Experiment, Matt Dean, will be on the American Experiment sofa right around 8 o'clock this morning. He has a piece this morning that is available at AmericanExperiment.org, and in that piece, he lays out the number of candidates right now that are aligned with socialists because they are socialists who have won primaries across the country, including the Al Saeed guy, if the name alone wasn't enough. So he'll be joining us at 8 o'clock, and then Representative Kristen Robbins, former gubernatorial candidate, representative here in Minnesota. She's also going to be joining us on the couch right around 8:30. And looking ahead to next week, to let everybody know. First off, we have Freedom Friday tomorrow and a full house. Grace and Catherine from the American Experiment podcast will be with us. Max Reimer and A.K. Kamara on tomorrow's show. Really looking forward to the last Freedom Friday before primary day. On Monday, of course, we'll talk with Andrew Langer. Lisa Damuth will be with us on Monday's show, as will Michelle Tafoya. So we have a packed series of shows heading into primary day next week. And I can just tell you right up front, I'm going to be glad when this primary is over. Especially with Farm Fest taking place this week and the debates that happened. I have audio to share on today's show from some of the debates at Farm Fest. And again, from an outsider's perspective, looking at the goings-on, my takeaway was I cannot wait until we're past the primary. I'll explain further here in just a moment. So it's been a busy morning for me already. On the drive in, I end up passing by my former place of work, right? So timing-wise, I know when K102 host Chris Carr arrives at the station, because typically we would arrive around the same time when I was working for Me Muscle. So I was running ahead of schedule as I was getting ready to pass by my former employer in St. Louis Park, and I looked at the clock and I was like, you know what? I'm pretty sure that if I pull over right now and pull into the parking garage, he's going to be arriving within minutes. Well, and I wanted to specifically because I hadn't seen my friend since I was unceremoniously let go, which was the best thing that could have happened to me. Again, no animosity whatsoever towards my former employer. But Chris Carr was indicted. I told myself, again, overconfidence. I told myself, Devin, before the show started, inducted, not indicted, John. You talk a lot about indictments on the show. Don't mix up those two words. And I did anyway. He was inducted into the Country Radio Hall of Fame. So I wanted to swing by and see my friend and tell him congratulations in person. So that was fun. There was a brief moment where I was sitting in the garage and I was the only one there. And I'm like, if anybody else shows up for work and they know me, they're going to be gravely concerned. John's just sitting in Monty in the parking lot with the engine running. Thankfully, he was the only one that showed up, and so he was. I was pleased to see him, and he was pleased to see me. So that was a nice little. Moment on the way in. So again, congratulations to my good friend Chris Carr for being inducted into the Country Radio Hall of Fame. He absolutely deserves it. One of the nicest guys in radio that I know, and I miss him and the crew over there very, very much. All right. So today, the theme of the show is kind of going to be the good, the bad, and the ugly on a number of different fronts. Let's start here. We talked about this story yesterday, of course, because it involves Donald Trump and the potential of somebody to do harm to Donald Trump. It has already completely disappeared from the headlines, but it is official. The heavily armed man that was arrested at the Trump National Golf Club in California was impersonating a State Department security guard ahead of President Donald Trump's visit there. He was stacked with hollow point bullets, firearms, and looks to be another thwarted attempt, at least planning, to do harm to President Donald Trump. Here's a bit of the reporting from yesterday.
Him walking throughout the grounds, taking photos and videos, and after searching his pockets, found a loaded magazine with hollow point bullets. Feds say when he was approached, the man claimed he was working for the State Department and was part of a security detail. Agents then searched his vehicle, which was parked in the golf course parking lot, and recovered a loaded pistol and another loaded magazine. Deputies also later searched his home, finding an illegally modified AR-style rifle, along with a .45 caliber pistol, body armor, high-capacity magazines, ammo, and multiple notebooks containing concerning statements. He's now facing 4 state charges and a federal charge of possession of an unregistered rifle. The Los Angeles Sheriff's Department has not mentioned any direct threat to the president, who safely hosted an RNC fundraising event last night at the golf club and reacted to the arrest on Fox News at Night.
There was a threat. There was a man who was arrested, seemed to be heavily armed near the property here on Sunday. It's an ongoing concern, sir. Talk about that for briefly, if we can.
Well, the only thing I get a little solace from is they say only consequential presidents. And I am definitely consequential.
The arrest comes just...
And we had shared that audio clip from President Donald Trump yesterday. The real... So, first off, it's a good thing that this guy was caught ahead of time, okay? Probably not going to be the last individual wanting to go and do harm to the president. I don't want to go over the same ground that I went over yesterday talking about how this is... And again, another example, it's the further radicalization of individuals on the left because of the inflammatory rhetoric surrounding President Donald Trump that encourages nutbars like this to want to do harm to the president. But beyond that, this falls under what I talk about all the time on the show, the conversations that we're just not allowed to have. We should be having a national discussion about exactly what I'm talking about, regardless of political affiliation. We should not have a sitting president of the United States facing this much continued threats. It shouldn't be this way. And maybe it wouldn't be this way if we addressed the issue about why this is happening head on, and we had adult conversations. Again, all of this would only happen if we had a mainstream media that was willing to go and do so, and we just simply don't. Whether it's local, whether it's national. The Democrat Party right now, and the majority of the commentators and the journalists that you see on TV, that you see writing, publications, they have no interest in the truth. I mean, we spent, the better part of an hour and a half talking with social media influencer, Minneapolis resident, Becca Thompson yesterday on the show about the fact that right now, when it comes to the politicization that we're dealing with, you have a party that has no interest in searching for the truth. They are completely 100% agenda driven. And so the major problems that we have within society right now that we could go about addressing to try to find tangible solutions, we're just incapable of and not allowed to have those conversations to get anywhere. We should be talking about why this is happening to President Donald Trump, regardless of how somebody feels about him. And of course, if Trump was a Democrat, we all know what the commentary would end up being surrounding these types of assassination attempts and, planning for assassination attempts. And that's the real tragedy in all of this, because it's only going to get worse as time goes on. It's not going to get better. And just because Trump leaves office after this term, the next Republican to sit in the White House, we're going to be in exactly the same situation, because the same type of over-the-top inflammatory rhetoric is going to fuel the type of encouragement to individuals like this person at the golf club that looks to be planning an attempted assassination against President Donald Trump. And that's the real sort of unintended tragedy about all of this. I'm just as concerned as everybody else. And again, we'll talk with Matt Dean further about this, and we spent a good chunk of yesterday's show discussing this. But how far left the Democrats have gone, the number of self-avowed socialists, and I agree with Becca Thompson, yesterday's guest, that these are communists. Listen, I'm just as concerned as everybody else, and we need to have that discussion, and we'll continue to have that discussion on the show. There is one potential bright spot, and that is what we're dealing with now was kind of inevitable. And once again, we're going to have to go and face, essentially, the Democrat Party is going to have to face a reckoning on this front and decide for themselves what they want their party to be. There are voices out there on the left that are pushing back on these communists who have taken over the party. But unfortunately, it seems like the majority of Democrats currently are more than happy to have these individuals take over the party if it means that they get to win elections. But the problem with that is that those Democrats right now, that if you ask them in private, if they agree with these socialists and these communists, especially the establishment Democrats, they probably would tell you no, even though in public they're out there touting, oh, it's a big tent. Chuck Schumer just yesterday was asked about this. He was asked about how do you feel about all these Democrat socialists that are winning these primaries or winning these seats? And he went on that very rant. Oh, the Democrat Party is a big tent. So we welcome everybody. They're going to come for them too. Chuck Schumer doesn't care. He's on the back end of his career. Probably should have left Congress a long time ago. A lot of those establishment Democrats are the same, but if that's what they want their party to become, yeah, we're in deep, deep, deep trouble here in this country. Because what you see happening in places like Dearborn, Michigan, is just going to spread if we don't tap down on this now. And as a bit of a preview for later in the show, we will get into, and I promoted this at the end of yesterday's show, but Republican Senator Michael Holstrom has launched a Sharia-free Minnesota caucus in the state legislature. I have audio to share of the announcement from Michael Holstrom that he did online ahead of the formation of this Sharia-free caucus. And there are all kinds of caucuses that take place within the legislature. And I support this Sharia-free caucus, but as I mentioned yesterday, the real tragedy here is that we have to have a Sharia-free caucus at all, that this even has to exist. But it does, for the very reason that I just laid out. What will be interesting to see, and I saw a friend of the show post this on X earlier. It'll be interesting to see what the outcome of the primaries will end up being in the elections more specifically. what the outcome of the elections are going to be against these avowed Democrat socialists. Because the question that they were asking online was, okay, now that the Democrats are going and nominating these DSA members, these communists, to be their candidates in these races, does it mean that the GOP ends up winning these particular elections? I don't know the answer to that yet. And we won't have a good idea until we get some polling in the coming weeks between now and November to give us some sort of gauge on whether or not, even though these individuals won the primary, which is a much smaller group of individuals voting, whether or not these individuals are going to have the larger mainstream support of the Democrat Party that'll need to turn out if they want to elect these people into power. Listen, that being said, I mean, we have our own controversies on the Republican side of things, but I'm certainly glad I'm not a Democrat. Holy cow. But how many of these Democrats are even aware of these individuals? I mean, when you have a person, like I mentioned, getting to that article from El Said's primary victory signals clear leftward shift in Democrats' health politics. That's the piece from Matt Dean that he will join us at 8 o'clock to talk about. But it's right there in the dude's name, okay? It kind of is the springboard for Democrats to find out if they're not already aware of the background and what these individuals actually believe. And if they vote them into positions of power, it is going to be to their own detriment. We've already seen what can happen when these individuals get power, whether it's Mamdani, whether it's what's happened in Dearborn, Michigan. So, again, I'll be glad when the primary is over. And I'd say I'd be glad when the election's over in November, but to be honest, it all depends on what the outcome ends up being. 612-584-4565. That's the blaster line. If you'd like to leave a comment for the show, you can also email jon.justice@americanexperiment.org. Remember, you can watch the show live at MN Think Tank on X, also Facebook and YouTube. Center of the American Experiment. You can watch it there. And, of course, you can listen live at americanexperiment.org or on the MixLR app, the MixLR app. Podcasts are available on that app when the show is over and on all major podcast platforms. All right, we'll dive into the good, the bad, and the ugly ahead of the review of the debates that took place at Farm Fest. I'll give you details on how rules for thee, but not for me, and the double standard. A former DFL leader gets less than a year in jail for a fatal hit and run of a teen. And Rochelle Olson, Rochelle. She writes in the Star Tribune why I'm suspicious of the Callie Her allegations, and you should be too. They're all hacks. They're all leftist hacks. Listen, again, I'm not going to bury the lead on this. Callie Her, Horny Her, the St. Paul mayor, has not denied the allegations. She all but admitted the allegations were true, but chalked them up to being a joke. But when it comes to hack editorial columnists like Rochelle Olson, they don't care. Again, she falls into the category, like so many others that I was talking about a moment ago. They simply do not care or are interested in getting to the truth at all. It's all about what benefits the narratives, what benefits the party, and what the readers expect of hack leftist columnists like this. Again, leave us a blast to 612-584-4565. We'll be back in just a moment. Here is some commentary that you might have missed from AmericanExperiment.org on the Jon Justice Show, presented by American Experiment.
What's that thing that Keith Ellison said in the December 2021 meeting with fraudsters? Money is freedom. Money is power. Yeah, right? I mean, that's happening in Minnesota, and you don't just see it with public sector unions generally, but especially, I mean, look at the teachers union. It is like cartel levels of control that they hold over the DFL here in Minnesota. So even if there were some DFL legislators who, say, wanted school choice and thought it was a great policy, the teachers union is so against it and so against any meaningful reform that they really can't come out and support it because they're being funded, their campaigns are being run by the union.
Think about it. Now that school's out for the summer, how are Minnesota students doing? Not very well. Minnesota ACT scores fell again last year and are the lowest they've been in 10 years. In fact, fewer than half of Minnesota students can either read or do math at grade level. Think about it. We used to brag about our schools. Now we're losing to states like Mississippi. Visit AmericanExperiment.org for more information. Think About It is brought to you by Center of the American Experiment, Minnesota's think tank.
Minnesota is the second most generous state in the nation, spending $46,000 on public welfare per person in poverty in 2023. Second most generous.
Just really quick, if those people in poverty had the $46,000, they wouldn't be in poverty.
So I just would like to quickly point out checks.
Quickly point out that the government is once again like the least efficient organization in the world.
Think about it. Minnesota has always been a low crime state. But according to the most recent Bureau of Criminal Apprehension data, we are now above the national average when it comes to Part 1 crimes, a category that includes crimes like murder, assault, rape, and carjackings. Think about it. Minnesota is now a high crime state. Visit highcrimemn.com to learn more. Think About It is brought to you by Center of the American Experiment, Minnesota's think tank. Think about it. A famous politician once said, "You're entitled to your opinion, but you are not entitled to your own facts." But in a world full of AI and fake news, where can Minnesotans find the facts? Center of the American Experiment is Minnesota's go-to source for fact-based analysis and common sense solutions for taxes, energy, public safety, and our kids' education. Visit AmericanExperiment.org for more information. Think About It is brought to you by Center of the American Experiment, Minnesota's think tank.
Hey, John, Brandon, Cottage Grove. Long time no talk. Glad to see you back on the air. I've been listening to the podcast later because it's too hard to follow while I'm at work live. Hey, just wanted to comment on a comment I heard on today's show about Mike Lindell's pay stubs. That is incorrect. Your pay stub shows the city or state where you collected your income from, not your place of residence. So I hope that clears that up. Have a great
Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate the blast. Again, 612-584-4565. I didn't see any news regarding the controversy surrounding Mike Lindell's residency coming out of the Farm Fest events yesterday, so we still are waiting to see what transpires of that. Of course, we reported yesterday on the show that you had Alex Plekish, chairman for the GOP, asking for clarification on Mike Lindell's residency. And if it's not cleared up, as I keep saying, before the primary, and Mike Lindell ends up being the winner of the primary next week and the gubernatorial nominee for the GOP, the DFL is going to be all over it. So I hope that over the course of the next few days and the weekend, we get firm clarification on Mike Lindell's residency status. I wish this wasn't the case. I wish this wasn't a controversy, but unfortunately it is, and this is where we are.
Hey, John, I thought communism was illegal in the United States of America. How can they even be running for this? Is it because they labeled themselves DSA instead of communists?
Well, I'm sure if you asked them, they wouldn't say that they were communists. First off, I don't think communism is illegal in the United States. I mean, we have all kinds of wackadoodles running on all kinds of different platforms for offices. So when I have a chance, I'll look that up. But I haven't heard that, and I don't know what law that would be. These individuals aren't going to go and align themselves directly with communism yet. But look, I didn't expect that individuals who were self-avowed socialists would gain as much traction and actually win primaries or elections. And we've seen, again, this slippery slope throughout the years, especially in these radically progressive stronghold metropolitan cities across the country, Minneapolis included, Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, where these self-avowed socialists have won elections. And it speaks to the horrible job of the public education system, or should I say, the intended job by Democrats who have driven our public education system into the ground, where they have ignored history. They haven't taught students how damaging socialism is, how deadly communism is. They've been indoctrinating them into these ideologies, and now we've seen the ramifications of that because they graduate, they get a little bit older, the indoctrination continues at the university level, they enter into politics, and then they are all pluck, 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 pluck. They're all plucked dutiful Democrat, socialist, a communist, ready to go and run for office, having been groomed and indoctrinated from a very, very early age. So listen, apart from, whether communism is or isn't legal in the United States, make no mistake, there are going to be individuals that will further align themselves with that radical ideology, that dangerous and, again, deadly ideology, if they find it politically expedient. Cindy Martin is the former chair of the 8th Congressional District, DFL. She was sentenced to only 364 days in jail for the fatal hit and run of the 19-year-old Carter Haythcock. Despite the severity of the crime, Martin received support from prominent Democrats who vouched for her character and decades of volunteer work. The sentence also includes 5 years of supervised probation, community service, and a fine. Listen, I don't know enough about, prosecutions of individuals and whether or not the punishment fits the crime in all of this, but it certainly doesn't seem to be the case, in my opinion, with what's happened here. Cynthia Martin pleaded guilty to 1 count of criminal vehicular homicide involving a driver who leaves the scene of a collision under a felony Minnesota law. It's a felony under Minnesota law. According to the prosecutors, Martin struck Haythcock with her SUV on Highway 169 on July 3rd and then drove away. Questions about what she was doing prior, the location she was at, and whether or not she had been drinking or otherwise. I mean, this is all part of the reporting. Investigators later identified Martin's vehicle through surveillance video and forensic evidence, including a damaged SUV with a non-functioning passenger side headlight, front end damage, windshield cracks, and fabric on the hood that investigators said matched the sweatshirt Haythcock was wearing. Martin contacted authorities the following morning, telling the dispatcher that she believes she may have been involved in a crash. You either know if you're involved in a crash or you don't. I might have hit something. I got damage on my car, and there seems to be somebody's bloody clothing. I don't know what happened. Why don't you know what happened? According to the charging documents, she later told investigators she thought she had struck an owl or a turkey. Days before the sentencing, Martin's attorney filed more than 40 pages of character references from friends, family members, political allies, community leaders, asking the court to consider her decades of volunteer work and public service when imposing the sentence. Governor Dim Walz and this idea that he put forward that now, it's been out there for a long time. Governor Dim Walz just made it mainstream when he attempted to go and he did pardon him, and then he got deported, to Lou Vang, the illegal alien who had raped a 10-year-old girl repeatedly. And in attempting to go and justify his grotesque pardon, Governor Dim Walz said that we shouldn't be judged on our worst day. This is the mentality that permeates the Democrat Party, and this is another example of that. Yeah, this person may have done all of these things beforehand, but in that moment, she was a horrible human being, and this sentence and this punishment should have been much stiffer than it was, and than it is. Among the most prominent supporters was Minnesota House Majority Leader Ryan Winkler, the socket wrench of all socket wrenches within the DFL. That's because he's a tool, Devin, just so you know. Who wrote that Martin has earned the benefit of the doubt and that he would always trust Cindy Martin to be a good person and do the right thing. You got to give them credit, man. They are so willing to go and turn a blind eye as long as it's politically expedient for them. Shortly after Haythcock's death, Alpha News contacted the Itasca County DFL, where Martin was the vice chair, about the reports that Martin had been involved in the fatal hit and run. The local party responded at the time that the accident had nothing to do with the Itasca County DFL. When asked again, the organization added, accidents happen, and the accident is under the investigation. The accident has nothing to do with the county DFL, end of story. Martin remained the chair of the 8th Congressional District DFL until December of 2025. Listen, I don't want to spend more time on this than is necessary, but I just want to take a moment and just stop down and draw attention to the fact that somebody died that didn't have to. She struck this individual, and in my opinion, knew she struck this individual, and she drove away. For whatever reason, she was afraid to do the right thing like normal people would do, like good people would do, like honest people would do. And regardless of what condition she may or may not have been in, if you're a good and honest person, you call authorities, because who knows if the individual that you just hit and their life could be saved. But she was, in my opinion, more worried about what could happen to her that she drove away. And an individual died, and there's no bringing back that individual for those family members. I can't even imagine what it must be like for them to have to go and live with the fact that this individual is no longer with them. And it was probably completely avoidable. 612-584-4565. If you want to leave a blast, to 612-584-4565. You can also email jon.justice@americanexperiment.org. A friend of the show, Daniel, wrote in, President Eisenhower in 1954 signed into law the Communist Control Act, which is still on the books. Okay. So there you go. There's your answer. I'll do some digging when I have a chance further into that and what it means. So we need a Democrat Socialist of America Control Act at this point in time. I guess the voters can go and decide that in these upcoming elections, since this is where we are now. Keeping with the good, the bad, and the ugly. Liz Collin over at Alpha News. Multiple sources confirm a male inmate has received bottom surgery while serving a life sentence for murder at Minnesota's women's prison in Shakopee, and taxpayers likely covered the cost. You can't make this up. This should be Babylon Bee material, not a major story in Alpha News, and yet here we are. Bradley Servio, a convicted murderer who beat a man with a hammer and set the victim's house on fire, is one of several men allowed at the women's prison under Governor Tim Walz's Department of Corrections transgender policy put in place in 2023. So this convicted murderer is in the women's prison. When asked by a Department of Corrections spokesperson about the recent surgery and how it was paid for, the DOC said they cannot confirm, doing that thing with my fingers, they cannot confirm, disclose, or discuss the private medical information for any individual in our custody. It is important to understand that the agency is constitutionally and legally obligated to provide health care to people in state custody. I'm going to get back to that in just a moment, because that is absolutely key. Decisions about medical care and treatment are made by qualified healthcare professionals. Okay. And treatment is based on established standards and an individual patient's clinical requirements. Healthcare provided to those committed into custody of the Department of Corrections is funded through the department's appropriated healthcare budget. Because the DOC is constitutionally obligated to provide medically necessary healthcare, and regardless of the diagnosis or treatment needed, associated costs are borne by the department, the statement reads. So here's the problem on a number of different fronts. So the reason why they ended up approving this murderer's bottom surgery is because to deny this individual, it's not healthcare, okay? It's not. It's body mutilation. But to deny this murderer the ability to go and mutilate his own body would negate Governor Tim Walz and his allowing of a man to be in a women's correctional facility under transgender policy. The health care this individual should have received, let me back up even further. He never should have been in the women's prison in the first place. This is part of the reason why. But instead of giving him the needed health care, which is mental health, that's the help that this dude needed. He should never have been put in the women's prison. He should have been given mental health evaluations in the men's correctional facility. But instead, what do? In order to justify Governor Dim Walz and his anti-biological stance regarding transgender individuals, and in this case, those that are serving within the prison system, we enable and we contribute to their mental instability by allowing taxpayer dollars to go and mutilate the body of a murderer. Now, listen, I don't care because this individual is clearly messed up, and now they're going to be messed up even further, considering what allegedly the surgery would have entailed. It's tragic, but this guy essentially got what he wanted to get, and I can't imagine that he's going to be living any type of full life or any sort of benefit as he serves out his sentence of murdering an individual with a hammer and setting their house on fire. So whatever, dude. The tragedy is that your taxpayer dollars paid for it, my taxpayer dollars paid for it, Devin's taxpayer dollars paid for it, and that we are doing a grave disservice to people here in Minnesota at every single step of the way on stories like this. From taxpayer funding to the narratives that are formed to putting women who are already serving their time for whatever they have been convicted of. They're in jail. They're serving out their sentence. There shouldn't be an added punishment of having to go and share the space with whack job men like this individual. And yet, here we are. Told you, the good and bad and the ugly for a Thursday. I'll try to find some bright spots. Well, it'd be kind of fun coming up next. We'll do some tearing into Rochelle Olson. Rochelle. Chris Maddle, the attorney for the St. Paul police chief, who has put forward the allegations, fired back on X to Rochelle Olson. I'll be sharing with you his thoughts as well coming up on the show. And then we'll get into Farm Fest. And a lot of weirdness coming out of Farm Fest from both the left and the right. I have the audio evidence to share coming up on the show. Again, leave us a blast. Comment on the show, 612-584-4565. I'm going to take a look at your emails here in just a moment that have been rolling in as well. Jon.Justice@AmericanExperiment.org. Now, here is more commentary from AmericanExperiment.org. Grace, Catherine, and our upcoming guest in the 8 o'clock hour, Matt Dean, here on the Jon Justice Show, presented by American Experiment.
I looked it up, and the percentage of children in poverty in Minnesota is about 10%, which is lower than the national average. So how come somewhere around a third, 33%, say, of children in Minnesota are on Medicaid if they aren't poor?
Sure. My kids are grown now, but I had 3 kids that I raised. And for us, we could make over $100,000 a year, and still our kids would be on Medicaid, if you can imagine that. That's middle class. That's crazy. And, we also, as a state, I think we should really measure ourselves by how few people have to rely on the government for health care, not how many. Mm-hmm. But if you ask, Governor Walz, he'll say, the more people we feed, the better. The more people on government programs, the better. And that's really how he measures the state. And we really see that in the numbers in Medicaid, which have just exploded.
Think about it. Now that school's back in session, how are Minnesota students doing? Not very well. Minnesota ACT scores fell again last year and are the lowest they've been in 10 years. In fact, fewer than half of Minnesota students can either read or do math at grade level. Think about it. We used to brag about our schools. Now we're losing to states like Mississippi. Visit AmericanExperiment.org for more information. Think About It is brought to you by Center of the American Experiment, Minnesota's think tank.
We're doing a really big deep dive on Medicaid right now at the center. We're looking at just how the heck this has gotten so out of control in Minnesota. And just like since 2023, okay, we spent $18 billion on Medicaid in the state, okay? Now we are spending $27 billion in this year, okay? And we are spending that on fewer people on Medicaid. So there was 1.4 million people on Medicaid in 2023. Now there is 1.2. So you have to ask yourself, how in the heck can we be spending that much more money on Medicaid? And we're really looking into that because we think a lot of that money is going to people who are dead, people who live in other states, people who are on more than one program. And you are not surprised because you've seen that on so many different programs in the state of Minnesota. But Medicaid is by far the biggest enchilada when it comes to that.
Think about it. Now that school's out for the summer, how are Minnesota students doing? Not very well. Minnesota ACT scores fell again last year and are the lowest they've been in 10 years. In fact, fewer than half of Minnesota students can either read or do math at grade level. Think about it. We used to brag about our schools. Now we're losing to states like Mississippi. Visit AmericanExperiment.org for more information. Think About It is brought to you by Center of the American Experiment, Minnesota's think tank.
And you can listen to the show, and you can also hear more of that commentary and the articles that are written daily by the policy fellows here at American Experiment at AmericanExperiment.org, which presents this show every day. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jon Justice, and I'm glad you're with the program this morning. If you miss any portion of the broadcast, you can always watch the replays. Those are available as they are live right now on Facebook and YouTube. And, of course, on all podcast platforms once the show is over. And the podcasts are posted up on the MixLR app where you can listen to the show live wherever you are. Let's go back to your blast this morning. Comments at 612-584-4565. Several have rolled in regarding the former DFL Itasca County chair who's been sentenced in the hit-and-run death. Let's go back to the blaster line. We'll hear from friend of the show, Bob.
Why else would you drive away from the scene of an accident unless you didn't want your blood alcohol content to be tested? This is the same thing that Ted Kennedy, another Democrat, did. He waited till the next morning to report the accident.
And listen, what's even worse about this whole thing? It's the support that the individuals give. It's the fact that the left has done such a great job through decades of just convincing their base of supporters that it doesn't matter how somebody conducts themselves. It doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter what the convictions are. As long as we win against the evil Republicans, as long as we stop the horrible conservatives, they've been incredibly successful in indoctrinating their party into this. And I've been saying it for years. If you're on the left, you can be as irrational and hypocritical as you want to be, as long as it furthers the agenda. Let's hear from Victor, friend of the show.
Good morning, John. Victor from Bloomington here. I've never understood this, but she's such a good person. She volunteers. She does all this community work. Ted Bundy was a Boy Scout leader. Does that mean he didn't kill a bunch of college students? But he was such a good guy in the community.
Yeah, and I made the example before, and Victor called, and he went and left another blast at 612-584-4565, and he clarified that it wasn't Ted Bundy, it was a different individual. Listen, either way, you could just make the analogy. What if Ted Bundy were a Boy Scout leader? Look at Lance Belter. I didn't see a whole bunch of people coming out and saying we should really be lenient on Lance Belter because, prior to his assassination of legislative lawmakers and the attempted assassination of those in the legislature here in Minnesota, we shouldn't judge him on his worst day. That was just a bad day for him. Now, you'll never hear that coming out of Governor Dim Walz because of what I just mentioned a moment ago. If you're on the left, you can be as irrational and hypocritical as you want to be as long as it furthers the agenda. Regarding Mike Lindell and the residency status, this friend of the show might actually have a pretty good idea here on the Jon Justice Show.
Yeah, I'm actually going to vouch for Mike Lindell that he's eligible to run for governor. He doesn't have to show ID, and I'm going to vouch for him and I believe 7 others. That'll be no problem. Thanks.
That's right. You can do that here in Minnesota. You can just go and vouch for up to 8 people on election day. They're all good. They're totally legal. They can totally go and vote. You don't need to question it. I vouch for them. Let's hear from Michael.
Mike from Minnetonka. Come on, you can't be that harsh on this guy. According to Dim Walz, no one should be judged on their worst day. Just because you bludgeoned someone to death and started their house on fire, do you really need to go to prison?
Nope. Not if you're on the left and it's politically expedient for you to go and defend those individuals. And going back to kind of combine the commentary from the start of the show, this is how you get these self-identifying Democrat socialists winning these elections. Individuals who are really communists, even though they may not say it out loud, or they'll avoid the controversy in the few interviews that they do, and the media, even if they do ask them the question, doesn't bother to press them on the issue. When you have Democrats out there willing to go and defend the worst of the worst criminals. Minnesota DFL and Nicole Mitchell's running for office for city council. Make no mistake. She'll probably end up winning at some point, and she'll probably end up in the legislature. If they're willing to go and defend those individuals' horrible actions, having a Democrat socialist end up winning a primary over your candidate, yeah, of course, they're not going to care. All right, let's go back to the comment line. Your blast brought to you by American Experiment at 612-584-4565.
John, the DFL will keep telling us that they're not paying for these surgeries, just like they're going to tell us that we're not paying for illegal immigrants to have health care. But I see it every day in the clinics and in the healthcare field. So we cannot believe them.
And we'll continue this line of thinking. Thank you all for the comments this morning. And again, Jon.Justice at AmericanExperiment.org, because everything that we're talking about right now falls into the same camp as this ridiculous Rochelle Olson. Rochelle. I don't have the quote again. I gotta get it from Seinfeld. I've actually been in the middle of a Seinfeld rewatch too. I should have grabbed it yesterday, but I'm a very busy man when it comes to this show. By the way, can I use that excuse if I have a bad show? I should not be judged by my worst show. Something tells me that foes of the show will not give me that sort of leeway. So Rochelle Olson writes this. I'll bring you a few points from this. I recently received a message from a colleague with a grimacing emoji that read, "Remember when you were impressed by Callie her?" I responded, writes Rochelle, with one word, yes. Doing nothing with my fingers. The snide insinuation, she writes, from the colleague is that I was wrong about Her's surprise campaign and candidacy last year that unseated the incumbent St. Paul Mayor Melvin Carter. I'll admit when I'm wrong, says Olson, but I need a lot more evidence to get there when it comes to Her. Horny Her didn't deny the allegations. I could probably just stop. I'm going to share with you because the more of what she has to say, because it's just that stupid, and I love sharing stupid stuff from the left, especially Rochelle Olson. But Horny Her, the St. Paul mayor, she didn't deny the allegations. She actually, through her words, in my opinion, admitted the allegations. She didn't say that didn't happen. She didn't say there was confusion and people are taking out of context. She said, oh, people just don't get my sense of humor. She basically admitted everything that has come forward so far of the multiple allegations, but dismissed them by saying, oh, that was just her trying to be funny. I mean, that's what this article should have been. If Rochelle Olson at the Star Tribune was any good at her job, that's the route she would have gone. You know, again, you can write an editorial based off of her saying that she was joking, and you can go on any sort of number of tangents about how, oh, I don't know, I'll get into the mind of a lefty for just a moment. Any number of tangents about how, oh, you know what, men just don't understand women's humor sometimes, and women are held to a higher standard when it comes to crude humor. No, she doesn't. She goes to, you know what, I'm not gonna buy into it until I see more evidence, despite the fact that her said that people didn't understand her humor. She went on to say, it's been just a week since we learned, confirmed via a leaked letter, of allegations by the police chief, Axel Henry, that the St. Paul mayor had, in her first 7 months in office, created an illegal sexualized work environment. See, it's interesting, a little game that Rochelle plays here, because she kind of overinflates what's happening here. Yes, these are sexual harassment allegations. But when you get into the details of the sexual harassment allegations, okay, they show a pattern of ridiculous behavior. I mean, none of this is incredibly dangerous, doing nothing with my fingers. making sex noises in front of people, asking women about their breasts, talking about her own breasts, the memes that she shared, the Wiener Wednesdays, we need a good wienering. All of it falls under the category, if true, of sexual harassment, but none of it is like overly nefarious. But you see, Rochelle Olson paints a picture that it is, saying an illegal sexualized work environment. You see, this way it downplays the allegations moving forward when she gets into the details and describes exactly what I did to you. Because the proper framing of this was how I just framed it. These could all potentially fall under sexual harassment claims, even though none of them were over the top or necessarily putting anybody in harm's way. You can have two things at once. You can be sexually inappropriate. You can sexually harass somebody, but it also can be a sexual harassment claim or allegation that doesn't rise to the level of like an assault. But she plays this little game in here where she makes it seem really extreme so that when she provides the details like I did, it makes them seem even less important. In the April letter, Henry's attorney, Chris Mattel, a former 2026 GOP gubernatorial candidate and litigator with a pro-cop, scorched-earth approach to conflict, really does paint the picture, doesn't she? Yeah, intentionally so. Said a lawsuit is reasonably foreseeable. The letter put the city on notice that the chief was reporting a pattern of sexual harassment by the mayor. The letter's contents are one-sided allegations, not proof of misconduct. Nobody is saying otherwise. Everybody is talking about this as being just that, allegations. There's a pattern of behavior that's developed in this, and people are extrapolating off of that. But actually, let me push back that this could, if these are true, I mean, they could be misconduct. It's sexual harassment. I don't want to give Rochelle Olson too much credit. So she talks about she says the number 6 refers to the floor at police headquarters, the location of the weekly Wiener repast at the same floor as the chief's office. So they have Wiener Wednesday when they have hot dogs. We have, every Wednesday we have food that's delivered here. I don't know if you had a chance to enjoy that yet, Devin. No night. Oh, yeah. Every Wednesday, you got to hang out.
That sounds good.
Free lunch. Yeah, a little Chick-fil-A action going on.
Ooh.
Yeah, I know. Oh, I know. She says, assumptions are dangerous, but I have to believe that St. Paul's top cop has sniffed out the weekly gathering on his floor and perhaps ingested a dog or two with relish. So, Rochelle Olson, in her infinite wisdom, is saying, we need to hold back. We need to, let's not rush to judgment on the claims made by horny her. My words, not hers. Okay? But what does she do when it comes to the individual who's putting forward the claim? She demonizes him. Where's the consistency? Again, if she were any good at her job, wasn't a hack for the DFL, wasn't in the tank for the DFL, probably, this is probably a phone a friend article. Somebody, just my own speculation. I imagine at some point there was a text or there was a phone call saying, hey, it'd be really great, Rochelle, if you could write an editorial and, say that everybody should wait on jumping to any conclusions over Collie Her. That would be great. But, when you do that, if you want to throw Axel under the bus, well, in the middle of it, go ahead. I would have given her credit if she had taken the same stance because that would have been the right thing to do. If you're going to say you need to wait for all the evidence to come in regarding the allegations against her, it would seem wholly appropriate to say, and the same thing rings true when it comes to the claims made by the police chief. We should wait until the evidence comes in. But no, she just ends up tossing him under the bus left and right on this. He may have ingested a dog or two with relish, but we're supposed to believe that it was her, not the nature of the weekly gathering itself, that sexualized the otherwise tone of Wiener Wednesday doing that thing with my fingers. She goes on to write, the day after the hot dog letters surfaced, the second accusation came from another high-ranking police officer. The female officer claims that her made vulgar noises in the gym and commented on her breasts in the locker room. So what is Rochelle Olson's excuse for this one? Her had been invited to work out in the police gym shortly after her election. Anyone with a workout pal knows that there are few bodily secrets in the gym or the locker room, but supposedly the new mayor has single-handedly obliterated the boundaries of decency. Everybody just talks trash in the locker room, in the gym. Everybody does that. You know, you're going to give her a hard time for this. Whatever. God, such a hack. Her was also, by the way, invited to a St. Paul long-standing men's cigar group that meets regularly. I have yet to hear allegations of her body behavior at those sessions, but maybe they'll come out. So she's doing the narrative work for her. This goes back to my phone a friend and why this article actually exists. Nobody has talked about this cigar group that meets regularly. This is the first time it's been brought up, but what does Rochelle Olson do? Suddenly she injects it into the story and makes an assumption that we might hear something coming out of this. So what does Rochelle Olson know that we don't know? Did that phone a friend that might have taken place? Again, my speculation. I have no evidence of that. Did the phone a friend involve somebody saying, hey, you know what? And it'd be a really good thing when you write this article if you can mention that she's also gone to some of these men's cigar groups, and there might be some people coming out and saying some things about that. So if you could throw that into the mix and downplay it for us, that'd be really helpful. Rochelle goes on to say the allegations surfaced as her faced pressure from the left over her move to close 2 homeless encampments. Okay, so now we have further excuses where Rochelle Olson implies that these allegations are simply because of pressure and controversy already surrounding her. You know, for somebody who's taking the stance of we should wait for all the evidence to come into play, she certainly is filled with all kinds of speculation regarding reasons why her may not have done any of this. It's kind of amazing. She's a magical editorialist. This is what Rochelle says next. She says, maybe the timing is coincidental, or maybe it's a coordinated campaign against her. The mayor's been busy digging into the crannies of the city's finances, including the police department budget, which will not be spared. I get that a new mayor has a learning curve, but I have a hard time believing that she's the one who turned things trashy at the police headquarters. Why didn't she just lead with that? I have a hard time believing that, that she's the one. Again, it is that same argument that we heard before from other individuals. I know her and her past. And if all these allegations, let's just say the investigation turns out that the allegations are all true. Okay, that's the conclusion of the investigation. There's no denying it. I guarantee you one of the excuses that'll be offered up by Rochelle Olson is, well, her should not be judged based off of comments about her breasts, other women's breasts, Wiener Wednesday memes, or making orgasm sounds in front of, other individuals. We should not judge her by her worst days or day, or day. I don't know. It seems like there's a lot here. Let's go back to some of your thoughts before we continue on this. 612-584-4565 if you want to leave us a blast here on the Jon Justice Show, presented by American Experiment.
Good morning, John. As far as the sexual harassment accusations against the mayor of St. Paul, have you looked at the mayor of St. Paul? She looks like a human bowling ball.
Yeah, I'm going to stop it here. Listen, I'm not going to get into that. I'm not. Her has plenty of allegations of which we can poke fun of based off of what we know so far. I'm not going to go down the line of insulting a person's looks. It's irrelevant to the conversation, and it undermines. Again, no, that's fine. Yeah, opinions, it's all subjective. One person's bowling ball is another person's Heidi Klum, or maybe a more relevant model that actually is still modeling and young these days. One person's bowling ball is another person's Sydney Sweeney. How's that? By the way, I shared a video this morning. Sydney Sweeney, there was some victims of wildfires, and Sydney Sweeney was out there like handing out water bottles and helping residents, right? See, we should judge Sydney Sweeney by her best days. Just want to say that up front. All right, wrapping up this piece from Rochelle Olson. The allegations against her are unflattering. The final report will, I hope, give clarity to what's happened. At a minimum, the findings should include Her's explanations. Some of it doesn't look good, but for now, Her is unable to address the rumors and innuendo. If Her were to give a full public repudiation, she'd be accused of hindering the investigation and intimidating the witnesses. Rochelle Olson, I'm going to say it again in case you're way back in the room and you're not paying attention. Her didn't deny the allegations. She said that people didn't get her sense of humor. That basically says, hey, what these people are saying is true. I was just trying to be funny. Rochelle says, I'd argue her relative silence speaks to her respect for the integrity of the investigation. And when the report is finished, however, it must be made public, not buried under the technicalities of data privacy laws. Boy, she is like all over the map on this. Holy cow. In an interview, former state data practices chief Don Gemberling discussed conditions that may limit the report's release because personnel matters under many circumstances can be kept private. Ultimately, Gemberling said the cleanest way to make this public would be for the mayor to release this once it's final. Much is murky in this conflict, says Rochelle Olson, and maybe I'll be proven wrong, but for now, I'm standing with her. Because she's a DFL leftist hack. That's why. If only these leftist editorialists in the tank for the DFL took such a middle ground, skeptical stance on all controversies, regardless of party. But of course they don't. Because Rochelle Olson, just like the vast majority of the individuals at the Star Tribune, including Steve Grove, who's best buddies with commie Dim Walls, they're in the tank for the left, and they have absolutely no desire to get at the truth. They're merely an extension of the Democrat mantra of you can be as irrational and hypocritical as you want to be as long as it advances the agenda. That's it. It's a disservice to the people of Minnesota. It's a disservice to the readers of the Star Tribune. It's a disservice to the people of St. Paul, who stupidly put Collie Her into a position of power as the mayor of that city. I mean, do better. All right, we're heading into hour 2 here on the Jon Justice Show, presented by American Express. My name is Jon Justice, and the show is presented by American Experiment. Glad you're with us this morning. 612-584-4565. That's the blaster line where you can leave us a blast, a comment on anything that we're talking about on the show this morning. We are anticipating endorsed gubernatorial candidate Kendall Qualls to join us on the American Experiment sofa later on this morning. Policy fellow Matt Dean will be with us as well. And Representative Kristen Robbins will be joining us on today's show ahead of tomorrow's Freedom Friday. We'll get back to more of your comments from the blaster line here in just a moment. And we're also going to dive into audio and commentary coming out of Farm Festa yesterday. And as I said at the start of the show, I will be so glad when this primary is over next week. Right now, we've been talking about the Star Tribune editorial columnist Rochelle Olson urging the public to pump the brakes on rushing to judgment in the horny Her scandal. St. Paul Mayor Collie Her under investigation for sexual harassment allegations. Columnist of the Star Tribune Rochelle Olson defended her, urging the public to wait for the investigation's conclusion. Chris Maddle, the attorney for the police chief who filed the complaint, criticized Olson's column on X yesterday, arguing that it ignored key facts and presented an incomplete picture of the investigation. I want to share with you a little bit of what Maddle had to say here in just a moment. First, let's go back to the blaster line at 612-584-4565, and let's hear from you this morning.
Morning, John. Yeah, Rochelle Olson's a real gem, isn't she? She's the one who wrote just a few weeks ago how she cheered Governor Tim Walz for having pardoned the child rapist to avoid deportation.
Yep.
Because, well, you know, what he did was awful, but still was January 6th, and those people got a pardon.
Yeah.
Unbelievable stuff.
Such a grave disservice to the state. and the job that you have and the responsibility that you have. There is a responsibility here. I get bias. I understand that. I know they're on the left. I know they're in the tank for the left. But do a better job when it comes to crafting your arguments while you espouse your leftist ideals. And if you're going to take this wait and see approach until all the evidence comes in for her, then you should be doing the same for the individual making the allegations. She's essentially saying, I don't believe the allegations. I think that the St. Paul chief is lying and that her is simply misunderstood, or these are all just fraudulent. Chris Maddle wasn't having any of it yesterday after Olson suggested her may be paying a political price for inheriting a police chief she did not appoint, while simultaneously scrutinizing the department's finances as the city confronts a $26 million budget deficit. Olson's column did not sit well with Maddle, the attorney representing the St. Paul police chief, Axel Henry. I might have gotten that reversed earlier. My apologies if I did. Within hours of the publication, Maddle launched a lengthy series of posts on X accusing Olson of ignoring key facts, minimizing the allegations against the mayor, and presenting readers with an incomplete picture of the investigation. Maddle responded to Olson's discussion of Wiener Wednesday's gathering at police headquarters, in which she questioned whether it was really her rather than the nature of the gathering itself that had sexualized the weekly hot dog lunch. Maddle wrote this: so the fact that Wiener Wednesday existed is a license for the mayor to move forward an altered meme with the St. Paul police officer's face and say that this is what you look like after you gave her a good wienering? He went on to say, every time I think Rochelle Olson has reached rock bottom as a columnist, she somehow finds a shovel. Maddle previously said the altered meme depicted the face of a St. Paul police officer and then argued Olson's perspective would be different if the roles were reversed and a male elected official had sent a similar message depicting a female employee. I'd love to see lazy Rochelle and what she would say if Mayor Fry or, God forbid, Tom Emmer or Pete Stauber sent the same thing to a woman, he wrote. It's funny how we believe all survivors becomes, let's wait for all the facts the second the accuser is a man and the accused is a woman with a D next to her name. If I could pick up this mic and drop it, I would, because that's what that was. I'm telling you, Maddle needs to write a book or have a documentary. Just saying. Get J.C. Shea over at Alpha News to shoot it. It'd be fantastic. Maddle later sought to illustrate the point by posting a picture of what appeared to be an edited version of the same meme, replacing the redacted police officer's face with Olson's. Yeah, that was terrifying. I saw that online yesterday. Maddle also pointed to other images her allegedly altered, arguing Olson failed to mention the allegations that the mayor used AI to create an image placing the faces of St. Paul police officers onto the bodies of muscular UFC fighters, which was later displayed at police headquarters. And I haven't brought up this fact yet, but consider how far the DFL has gone to take away the ability to use AI for these types of memes. There's a law in place where you could be held criminally liable if you go and post imagery of candidates during a time frame of an election cycle. We also have the anti-nudification bill. I'm not justifying the nudification of individuals through AI. I just find it amusing that suddenly all of those pushes to go and restrict individuals' ability to utilize AI in various functions gets completely lost on all of this, and Rochelle Olson just avoided it altogether when this has been a cornerstone as of late of the rise of artificial intelligence for the DFL as they've been moving forward to craft laws. Maddle criticized Olson's assertion that anyone with a workout pal knows there are a few bodily secrets in the gym or locker room. He said this, doing that thing with my fingers. Do few bodily secrets at the gym include someone moaning like they're having an orgasm at the gym? Do you do that at the gym? Please send me the video. I'll pay you $100. It's kind of on the low end. I mean, you had Clay Travis that was offering up $10 million to get that team to compete against the WNBA, but that's me just making jokes. I don't really mean that at all. I think this is funny. He also said that Olson failed to mention the allegations that the deputy chief, whose breasts were allegedly commented on, retiring early following the alleged conduct. I guess the notion of a decorated woman law enforcement officer having to retire early due to hostile sexualized conduct is not even worth a mention. Of course it's not. Rochelle Olson had an agenda, and she moved forward with that agenda. Maddle also pointed to the Alpha News reporting on Tuesday, which detailed the text messages which her wrote that men she encountered through her political and professional life end up falling in love with me, so I have to set clear boundaries. Well, you know what? Callie her, she's quite the catch. Just want to say. For some people. Remember, it's all subjective. Let's go back to the blaster line. 612-584-4565.
Hey, John, I think when you talk about this reporter, Rochelle, you should drop in the drop from Seinfeld. Rochelle.
Yeah, I know. That's what I mentioned earlier. I used to have it, but unfortunately, that is sitting on the computer at my previous workplace. Oh, wow. I just realized. I think I know how I can get all that audio. As Devin slowly gets up and walks out of the room. It's, if I only knew somebody that worked over there that had access to the computer system that can go and get what is lawfully my audio from the computer, maybe I could go and grab it. I plead the fifth. There are legitimately a couple of things I need that I do have access to get, so I may actually have you go and do that for me. I was thinking about it today. I mentioned at the start of the show that I swung by my former place of employment because timing-wise, I knew that my friend Chris Carr at K102 would be arriving, and he was just inducted. I got it right this hour. He was just inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, Radio Hall of Fame, and I wanted to go by and, wish him congratulations. And I was going to actually ask him. I said, hey, you know what? If you could go into the system and get me Kiss the Tip, I would really appreciate it. But I didn't want to bug him. But now I have you. All right, let me wrap this up. We got other things to talk about. Maddle reiterated the point he said that he has made repeatedly during the recent radio appearances and that the public has not yet heard the full story. He says, and I keep saying this is all in capital letters, and I keep saying this, but all of the facts have not come out. But does Lazy Rochelle acknowledge that? Nope, that would require work. Maddle ended the thread by accusing Olson of poor journalism. Please remember, reading Rochelle Olson is a reminder that confidence and competence are not the same thing. The only predictable thing about Lazy Rochelle's column is that the next one will be even worse. And again, Rochelle Olson, like so many on the left, really don't care about the truth. They only care about the cause and the agenda. And that's abundantly clear. And yes, I know that not a lot of people read the Star Tribune anymore, but people do. And they deserve a lot better than this trash. Because that's what it is. I mean, at least, listen, at a bare minimum, at least it's an editorial, not an actual news article, which is also something that I would expect from the Star Tribune as well. All right, 612-584-4565 if you want to leave a comment. Jon.justice@americanexperiment.org. All right, quick break. I want to get to audio from Farm Fest yesterday. Some bizarre words coming out of Pete Stauber that require clarification regarding Representative Tom Emmer. Myself was even concerned based off of these comments. I have a clip from Royce White that, in a word, is entertaining. And then we have Amy Klobuchar getting booed and not taking it very well. My biggest takeaway from Farm Fest yesterday, by the way, and just what I saw of the debate, Amy Klobuchar is absolutely a beatable candidate. I don't have any doubt about that whatsoever. She's not a likable candidate. She's an angry, entitled candidate. It doesn't seem like she continues to display, in my opinion, the fact that she doesn't really want this job. She's not a welcoming individual by any stretch, and that was on full display during the debate at Farm Fest yesterday. So we'll get to that audio coming up in just a moment here on the show. I want to take a second, and after the show today, I'm going to be swinging by Nutriwave, NUTRIWAVE.US, to go see Dr. Bob, because I'm about to start another round on this amazing program. Because just like you, I've been through the yo-yo diet. You lose a few pounds, it comes back, right? And you gain more weight. You lose a few more pounds, and it all comes back again. That had been my life until this program, which has changed my health for the better in ways that I didn't even anticipate. I've changed my relationship with food. I still love food. I still eat the food that I want to eat, but I have a different relationship with it now just through the process of going through this program and losing 22 pounds. Neutral Wave turns on the fat burning. It reignites your energy. It's all natural, no pills, no shots, and there's no excuses. 31,000 people, myself included, across the metro have tried everything else, and Neutral Wave is where they got their life back. And right now, they are accepting a limited number of individuals to take advantage of this amazing offer. You can get a Truth Metabolic Session and red light therapy. Incredibly effective. I've done it myself. It's a $272 value. It's absolutely free. All you have to do is call Neutral Wave today and mention the keyword strike. You have nothing to lose, everything to gain, except for you're going to lose the weight and you're going to keep it off and you're not going to gain any more. That's happened with me. Listen, results may vary. Neutral Wave is not a medical treatment. Make sure you consult your physician before starting any weight loss program. But go to NUTRIWAVE.us today or give Neutral Wave a call and just mention the keyword strike to take advantage of this amazing offer. An almost $300 value, absolutely free, but spaces are limited. Again, 952-952-8685. That's 952-952-8685 for NeutralWave.us.
I looked it up, and the percentage of children in poverty in Minnesota is about 10%, which is lower than the national average. So how come somewhere around a third, 33%, say, of children in Minnesota are on Medicaid if they aren't poor?
Sure, my kids are grown now, but I had 3 kids that I raised, and for us, we could make over $100,000 a year, and still our kids would be on Medicaid, if you can imagine that. That's middle class. That's crazy. And, we also, as a state, I think we should really measure ourselves by how few people have to rely on the government for health care, not how many. Mm-hmm. But if you ask, Governor Walz, he'll say, the more people we feed, the better. The more people on government programs, the better. And that's really how he measures the state. And we really see that in the numbers in Medicaid, which have just exploded.
Think about it. Now that school's back in session, how are Minnesota students doing? Not very well. Minnesota ACT scores fell again last year and are the lowest they've been in 10 years. In fact, fewer than half of Minnesota students can either read or do math at grade level. Think about it. We used to brag about our schools. Now we're losing to states like Mississippi. Visit AmericanExperiment.org for more information. Think About It is brought to you by Center of the American Experiment, Minnesota's think tank.
We're doing a really big deep dive on Medicaid right now at the center. We're looking at just how the heck this has gotten so out of control in Minnesota. And just like since 2023, okay, we spent $18 billion on Medicaid in the state, okay? Now we are spending $27 billion in this year, okay? And we are spending that on fewer people on Medicaid. So there was 1.4 million people on Medicaid in 2023. Now there is 1.2. So you have to ask yourself, how in the heck can we be spending that much more money on Medicaid? And we're really looking into that because we think a lot of that money is going to people who are dead, people who live in other states, people who are on more than one program. And you are not surprised because you've seen that on so many different programs in the state of Minnesota. But Medicaid is by far the biggest enchilada when it comes to that.
Think about it. Now that school's out for the summer, how are Minnesota students doing? Not very well. Minnesota ACT scores fell again last year and are the lowest they've been in 10 years. In fact, fewer than half of Minnesota students can either read or do math at grade level. Think about it. We used to brag about our schools. Now we're losing to states like Mississippi. Visit AmericanExperiment.org for more information. Think About It is brought to you by Center of the American Experiment, Minnesota's think tank.
It's the Jon Justice Show presented by American Experiment. I just had the strangest thing happen. If you're watching on the live stream, which you can watch at MN Think Tank, also at YouTube and Facebook, and I'm only bringing it up because it's going to affect me for a few minutes. So I get coffee every morning. I have a whole routine. I won't get into it and bore everybody, but I have a cup of coffee in the morning when I get up. See, I'm dealing with this still. I have a cup of coffee at home, and then when I get here, usually I fill up my coffee cup here. This is actually the cover of my second book in my science fiction space opera series. Former producer, friend of the show, and host over at K102 at my previous employer made this for me. So this is actually my coffee cup. It's the second book in my series. Anyway, so we have a Keurig coffee machine in the break room. So the the little, what do they call them? Capsules, cups? There's Keurig cups, right? Is that what they usually call them, Devin?
I think so.
Yeah, I think it's Keurig cups, right? Okay, so the cups, how do I describe it? I should have grabbed one. They're like a net for the ones that we have for coffee. Instead of being a completely plastic container where the bottom gets punctured, the coffee is seated in like a net. So when you pull the cup out to put it in, you can actually see like the filter and the grounds inside of it. It must have broken open because I was enjoying my coffee, and it's typical, and again, I'm a creature of habit. I have a whole routine. So right about now, or actually about 10 minutes ago, is usually when I take my last sip. I'm like, into my coffee. It's just, the temperature is getting a little too cold. I wrap it up, and then I go and I put it away. So I went to swing back, to take a big swig to finish off the coffee, and it was pure coffee grounds. I threw graphic up on the screen for those that are watching, but I think that it actually ends up doing split screen, so my apologies to the viewers out there if you happen to watch me washing my mouth out and making a mess of the trash can that I put my used paper in. That was a shock to the system here on the Jon Justice Show. And if there was any conversation that was worthy of the drop, of course, right now I can't go.
You're fascinating to talk to.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Oh, very good. Very good.
All right, let's go here. Strangeness at Farm Fest yesterday. I assume it was different for people that were there, right? I watched the debate online, okay? The gubernatorial debate, some of the Senate stuff. And I have clips to share with you this morning. But if you're just online looking at what went down, just a lot of strangeness. Let's start here, though. So U.S. Representative Tom Emmer was noticeably absent from Farm Fest yesterday. Apparently, he was dealing with some foot injuries, which makes sense because he wasn't scheduled to be on the show today. But, of course, we had him on last week, and he appeared to be doing just fine. But U.S. Representative Pete Stauber made a shocking claim about the health of the House Majority Whip Tom Emmer, ended up walking it back later. So here was the clip that's been circulating online. Apparently, DFL congressional candidate Doug Chapin, who was challenging Emmer in the 6th District, was questioning Emmer not being there at the event. So Chapin questioned his absence, saying that he needs to answer questions and look constituents in the eye, to which Representative Pete Stauber responded this way.
Next up, our closing comments from the 8th District, Representative Pete Stauber.
Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. Thanks for the invite. To the farmers and your families, thanks for feeding us. Thanks for doing what you do. I want to go back to one of Doug's comments. You have no idea what Congressman Emmer is dealing with right now. If you did, you would have never made that comment. He's fighting for his damn life today. With that being said, I appreciate all of you.
So I saw this clip online, and I ended up sending it off on a couple of group chats because I hadn't heard anything, and I thought, and I believe that I was accurate. I thought that I had seen elsewhere online that Emmer was dealing with some sort of health issues, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, did I miss something about Representative Tom Emmer? We had him on the show last week. He was totally fine. I haven't heard anything else, and I didn't want to bug Tom in case there was something going on. I mean, the last thing I want to do is go and bug him about it. Apparently, though, it was much ado about nothing. Stauber, it sounds like, was defending his fellow GOP representative, maybe had been a little bit too exuberant in doing so, or maybe had a misunderstanding over what Tom was dealing with, because he struck a different tone later on. A spokesperson for Stauber told the Star Tribune that Emmer is not fighting for his life and that he was recovering from a series of foot injuries. Earlier this week, Emmer did appear healthy in an appearance on Fox News. Jake Sherman of Punchbowl News has said on social media yesterday that he had just spoken with a high-ranking Republican who was not gravely ill, nor did he sound like it. He did have a foot injuries for which he had a bunch of surgeries. So, yeah, that was one of the stranger moments to come out of Farm Fest yesterday. Also, things got elevated during the Senate debate. I want to go here. I have a clip from Royce White that I want to share. Before I do, though, I want to lay some groundwork here. Okay. So Michelle Tafoya was sitting next to Royce White, of course, Peggy Flanagan, Angie Craig. I have audio of both of them to share on the show today as well. I've told this story before, and it's relevant to the comments that I'm going to make now. Early on in my radio career, I had a radio consultant who I owe a lot of my success to over his tutelage, mentoring, however you want to describe it. But one of the pieces of advice that he gave me early in my career was an incredibly scary piece of advice, but it's relevant. And it was be as genuine and as authentic as possible, and you'll reach the largest audience that you are capable of reaching. Okay? You don't get that a lot in politics these days, because most politicians don't want to show you who they truly are, because they also know that if they do that, and this is where the scary part of that advice comes into play, they know that, oh, well, if I show my genuine and authentic self, maybe that audience I'm capable of reaching is not nearly as big as I wanted it to be, right? But the only way to truly know that is to be genuine and authentic. What we get now are a bunch of politicians out there that aren't genuine and authentic. They're trying to cast a wide net as possible. And it typically happens on the left with Democrats. But see, the Democrats have been able to negate this through what I've mentioned on the show and earlier this morning. And that is the way that they vilified Republicans. They don't need to be genuine and authentic. They just need to play the hits, because they've convinced their base of voters that, hey, vote for me, don't worry, I'm just better than the Republicans are, regardless of whether or not you agree on my policies. So that's why you get these large generalities that don't have specificity to them, and I'll share this with you coming up with these clips of Peggy Flanagan and Angie Craig. So Royce White falls into this category. Royce White is incredibly genuine and authentic. And he's also, because he's being genuine and authentic to who he is, he's also reaching the largest audience that he's capable of reaching, which also, in my opinion, means that he's not going to win any elections. There's one thing that I appreciate about Royce White. Listen, he is who he is. He doesn't hide anything. People that like him, they get on board with it. It's great. But because of his caustic attitude, and because of how genuine and authentic he is on these issues, he's never going to break through with individuals, because that's who he is as a person. He'll forever just be a perpetual candidate. And let me add one more thing to this, because I know it's probably sounding like a criticism, but I want to give some background here for those that aren't aware. I've never personally had an issue with Royce White. When he was running for a previous office a number of years ago, I had him on the show. He was supposed to come in studio. He didn't. He ended up switching to a phone interview at the last minute, which is totally fine. I have no problem with that. I never begrudge individuals. If you can't make it in after you said you're going to, that's fine. I get it. As long as we get you on the show, that's great. Would I prefer that you stick to what we said? Of course. But, I understand that life happens, and it's no sweat off of me. We can still do the interview, even if it's on the phone via Zoom, even though we agreed for you being in studio. Okay. So we had an interview. It was perfectly fine. No issues. When he was running for the other office, moved on with life. So as time went on during that election cycle, as often happens, these candidates request to come back on the show. So I, invited him. He said, hey, can I come back on the show? Sure. Well, he was supposed to come in studio to make good for the first time, right? Well, he didn't show up. He ended up sending somebody else, which I've never had happen before. I've never set up an interview for somebody and then had, hey, they couldn't make it, without even being told, and they ended up sending a surrogate. I'm like, okay, this is different. This is weird, but I ended up interviewing this surrogate for Royce White. Then the next time I tried to have him on, Royce flaked on me altogether. Didn't show up for the interview when it was scheduled, didn't give me any warning. I didn't say anything about it. I didn't go online and lambaste the dude. I didn't say anything negative. I just moved on with life. I'm like, okay, fine. And the reason why I was able to do that on the show, by the way, is that typically I take a stance of, if the interview is going to be questionable, I don't do a lot of pre-promoting of it, just in the off chance the person doesn't show up. Okay. because I want consistency on the show, and I'd hate to be, this person's going to come up and then they don't show. That sucks. So I didn't pre-promote him. So because there wasn't any controversy to be had, I just completely let it go because I hadn't even let the audience, for the most part, know, apart from a promo that ran before, that Royce was going to be on the show. Okay, so why do I bring all this up? I bring all this up just so you have some background when I get into this commentary right now. Because about a year or so later, out of nowhere, Royce started taking a run at me online, criticizing me as being a rhino scumbag. I never talked about the dude online. I never said anything negative about him on the air or online, and I have no idea. It just simply came out of nowhere. Suddenly now he's lambasting me on X, calling me a scumbag and a rhino. So what do you do with that? I don't have a lot of respect for the guy for that very reason. And I also want to be as open and honest to you as possible. Again, be as genuine and authentic as you can possibly be, and you'll reach the largest audience that you're capable of reaching. All of that is to say that Royce White is his own worst enemy. And I wish it wasn't the case. I agree much with what Royce White has to say. But it seems to me that he's more interested in an agenda than he is about winning elections. For whatever reason, and you can come to your own conclusions. Case in point, here's a clip of Royce yesterday during the Senate debate at Farm Fest.
Yeah, we've already begun with the Kabuki Theater. And the Farm Bill is one of the greatest examples of uniparty dominance in this country. You see people who are supposedly ideologically separate from one another. They can't agree on anything, but they come to agreement on the Farm Bill. Why? Because the farmers are the backbone of this country. But make no mistake about it, they plan on selling you out just like everybody else. And to discuss some of these issues, when we don't get to the heart of matters, like, for example, California's given their country to communists and foreign invaders. Why are we even discussing what they're doing? We're on our way to the same place. Why am I even on stage having a conversation? I really came to debate in the show, Tafoya, because I don't see any credibility whatsoever with a political party that can't tell you the difference between men and women. How are they going to tell you the difference between the biological sex of your crops?
And listen, Royce has great points to make. But it's just unfortunate that it seems as if Royce White is just in it for Royce White, and that's it. If you followed him on X, you say any level, and I'm sure that if he ends up listening to this, I'm sure that he's going to go online and shotgun all kinds of commentary and rip me left and right and blah, 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 blah. He does it to everybody, but it's to his own detriment. I genuinely feel bad for the people that end up supporting Royce White because I don't believe that he can win elections because of the way that he conducts himself as a candidate. He seems to be much more interested in just being boisterous about these issues, many of which I agree on, than he is about actually legitimately wanting to go and win this election. I think he should be genuine and authentic. I think he's being genuine and authentic. And if this is who Royce White is, that's fine. But if that's the case, and this is how he's going to continue to go and conduct himself, unfortunately, he's not going to end up winning any elections. And that's a bummer for people that support him. Partly the reason why I'm going to be so glad when this primary season is over. All right. Let's dive into Amy Klobuchar and some of her thoughts from yesterday. There was a really interesting moment during Farm Fest yesterday. Amy Klobuchar talked about the issue of fraud and what she would do. Bill Glahn has a fantastic piece in AmericanExperiment.org this morning. And it essentially was dovetailing off of, or it's incredibly similar to the commentary that I was going to provide to you this morning, because I feel exactly the same way that Bill does. Here's some of Amy Klobuchar's comments.
Sure. The people of Minnesota were ripped off. This was wrong, and it should have been caught earlier. When I found out, I put more resources into the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I was the one that recommended Andy Lugar, who is a prosecutor who exposed the fraud and was the one that brought 70 of these cases. My plan as governor will be to do this. One, the minute I get in there, I will launch a top-to-bottom audit of state government. I will root out the fraud.
So Bill Glahn writes this. Senator Amy Klobuchar is criticized for her lack of action on fraud scandals in Minnesota, despite being a senior senator and a member of the Judiciary Committee. Right. Bill Glunn argues that she could have taken steps to address the issue, such as supporting bipartisan efforts, advocating for hearings, or filing in federal district court vacancy. But for Klobuchar's solutions, and this was my thought, many of these solutions are already in place. Why is she waiting until 2027? And going back to the media and just how complicit they are in carrying the water for the DFL, if you take the majority of what Amy Klobuchar said that she would do as governor, and you apply that to Governor Tim Walz and the fact that what she's saying pushes back, and it raises the question of, well, why didn't Tim Walz do this already? Why do we have to wait for Amy Klobuchar? My point being, she was tossing Walz under the bus over and over and over again. If that's not a headline-making opportunity for commentary and articles to be written, I don't know what is. You're not going to see it because the Democrats are not going to do anything to go and hurt their party, and those that run the media, the commentators, aren't going to do anything to go and hurt Amy Klobuchar's chances at winning, but that's the storyline, is that she basically undermined everything that Governor Tim Walz was doing by saying, hey, if you vote for me, I do all these things. Well, don't you support Governor Tim Walz? Haven't you supported him the whole time? He's a part of your party. Why hasn't he done any of these things that you mentioned, on top of the fact that much of what she's already gone and mentioned already has been done? Let's go back to the blaster line, 612-584-4565 if you want to leave a comment this morning.
Hey, John, Charlie, and Egan. Hey, man, the U.S. Senate forum was a sham yesterday at Farm Fest. You know, they didn't allow one of the candidates that's already on the general election ballot. She's not even running in the primary. They didn't allow her to speak. So all of Minnesota, none of the candidates on stage yesterday are already on the ballot. There is one that is. They didn't let her speak. That's Rebecca Whiting. She's a farmer up in Bemidji. They didn't even care about it. The sham.
My understanding, by the way, because there was a lot of controversy surrounding this, and I welcome any further clarification on this particular point, but my understanding was that the organizations that were involved in conducting the debates themselves, they had a set of standards and requirements for these candidates to be involved in these panels, in these debates. I think that it was centered around the latest polling data and how much they were polling at. And again, I welcome anybody that wants to provide clarity, because we talked about this week, we had Adam Schwarzy on, the Senate candidate, the endorsed Senate candidate, who I believe also wasn't invited to take part in this debate. Certainly didn't see him yesterday, but I think that it's because you needed to meet a certain threshold and requirement. And I understand why different organizations would go and do that, because the last thing you want is a stage filled with individuals that have absolutely no chance at winning because they're not polling at all. They just happen to be running. So you want to make sure that you have individuals who are most likely going to be the people that actually still have an opportunity to win the primary. That's my understanding on the issue, but I welcome any further clarification on that here on the Jon Justice Show, presented by American Experiment. I want to dive into a little bit more of Klobuchar being AWOL on the fraud issue here in just a moment on the show. I have more audio to share as well. As I mentioned, Matt Dean will be joining us at the top of the hour. Plus, audio from Angie Craig and Peggy Flanagan regarding immigration issues and Amy Klobuchar. It's just a good reminder when I share this audio with you, believe what they say they're going to do. You have Amy Klobuchar talking about being tough on crime, wanting to tackle fraud, but then essentially saying that, oh, you know what, though? I don't think that we should be spending money on immigration enforcement. That kind of pushes back on what she said prior. You have Angie Craig and Peggy Flanagan saying they want legal pathways to citizenship for illegal aliens. It's amnesty. There's a lot at stake, and these individuals are making their policy views abundantly clear over what they will do if they were able to win in November. I'll share that audio with you coming up in just a moment. You can email john.justice@americanexperiment.org. We'll get to more of your comments from Blaster here in just a moment on the show. Don't go anywhere. You are listening to the Jon Justice Show presented by American Experiment.
All the special interests are represented in St. Paul. But who speaks for you? Center of the American Experiment does. Our policy fellows dig into the tough issues that matter to you and offer common sense solutions on education, taxes, crime, and energy. American Experiment is the trusted, nonpartisan voice of Minnesotans like you. We are working every day to make Minnesota a better, safer, more prosperous place. We are American Experiment. Go to americanexperiment.org to learn more.
And they also state that Bach said on the telephone that her criminal defense attorney and the editor of the Star Tribune were making plans as to when to publish the article to garner the most strategic advantage.
So that's like pretty high level collusion between the Star Tribune and this woman who's sitting in a jail waiting to be sentenced for her role in the fraud scheme.
Think about it. Minnesota has always been a low crime state. But according to the most recent Bureau of Criminal Apprehension data, we are now above the national average when it comes to Part 1 crimes, a category that includes crimes like murder, assault, rape, and carjackings. Think about it. Minnesota is now a high crime state. Visit highcrimemn.com to learn more. Think About It is brought to you by Center of the American Experiment, Minnesota's think tank.
Most Minnesotans, based on our polling, would agree.
It was temporary from the beginning.
It was temporary.
Temporary COVID.
Going to people who don't need it. They can work, or they're illegal immigrants.
Yep.
Shouldn't be benefiting from the system anyway.
Yep, they're able-bodied or they're not Americans.
We're going to kind of roll through a few of the senators' opinions on why this funding is so crucial. Let's roll it.
Work reporting requirements don't work. The Trump administration and Republicans in Congress are forcing states to adopt these work reporting requirements so they can kick enough people off Medicaid to justify the tax cuts they gave to billionaires.
The single purpose of this is to kick people off of their health insurance.
Except to corporations and super rich donors, the only people who stand to gain from this deal.
Think about it. Now that school's back in session, how are Minnesota students doing? Not very well. Minnesota ACT scores fell again last year and are the lowest they've been in 10 years. In fact, fewer than half of Minnesota students can either read or do math at grade level. Think about it. We used to brag about our schools. Now we're losing to states like Mississippi. Visit americanexperiment.org for more information. Think About It is brought to you by Center of the American Experiment, Minnesota's think tank.
Education Minnesota came in and testified against that bill.
Yep.
Even though it included public schools, and their basic thing was we are testifying against this because it'll decrease the enrollment in public schools, decrease teacher funding in public schools, and basically take money away from our teachers in public schools. And when they did that, what just became so crystal clear, and every DFL representative fell in line, repeated the same anti-Trump talking points. What stuck out to me was like, wow, you really don't care about the kids.
Nope.
You really, really don't. The only thing you're prioritizing is public school enrollment, not for the sake of we need more kids in public school because they'll get the best education. The justification was we need more kids in public school so that our teachers can get paid in public school.
Yeah, they should be happy that there's going to be more private money under this program going to schools, more money in general. But they're not, because some of it might go to private schools. Meanwhile, in other states that are run by Democrats, they did opt into this program, and their kids are going to benefit from
Virginia
it. But here
did.
in Minnesota,
New York did. Michigan, Colorado. You had these other states that are blue states that were opting into this program. And I think just the most jarring part of it was listening to these DFL representatives, this DFL testifier from Education Minnesota, and going, wow, the point is not educating our children.
That was commentary from last week's Freedom Friday here on the Jon Justice Show presented by American Experiment. Max Reimer, representative, along with RNC Committeeman A.K. Kamara, Grace Keating, and Katherine Johnson will both be joining me in studio tomorrow for a Freedom Friday as we go back to the blaster line this morning.
Such a liar. Klobuchar is such a political person. She's just saying stuff to get elected. And by the way, if she married, who in the world would want to wake up to that voice every morning? Man, that's crazy. Don't play her clips, please. It's like fingernails on a chalkboard.
Well, unfortunately, James, we have to play her clips because unfortunately, she more than likely is going to be the Democrat nominee. Let's go back to the blaster
John,
line.
Charlie and Egan again. Yeah, you're absolutely correct that those standards were based on the polling. However, it was primary polling. Rebecca Whiting's running as a libertarian. She's not participating in the primary polling. Therefore, she wasn't even a choice in the primary polling.
Gotcha.
So how does it make sense logically that you're selecting for primary polling for a general election? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I understand your frustration, and you'll have to take it up with the individuals that made the decision to choose who would be and who would not be partaking in the debate at Farm Fest over the weekend. Let me get back to, before we play more audio for you, just to give you a fair warning, I have a couple more clips of Amy Klobuchar. Bill Glahn, AmericanExperiment.org, wrote this today. In a rare cross-party candidate debate, the subject of fraud was always going to come up. The 4 candidates for governor participated and generated this headline of the Star Tribune. At Minnesota's Farm Fest, Klobuchar's departure brand collides with the GOP demands for change. The article goes on to use the word bipartisan twice more in describing Amy Klobuchar without providing any evidence. She's been a sitting U.S. senator representing Minnesota for the past 20 years. The article on the debate finally gets to the subject of fraud in its final section, and the very last paragraph, Bill Glahn writes, says, Klobuchar didn't blame her fellow Democrats as a whole, but said the people of Minnesota were ripped off and that the fraud should have been caught sooner. She called for a top-to-bottom audit of the state government and other proposals. Now, Bill writes, that's it? Were people ripped off? Yes. Should it have been caught sooner? Obviously. But who should have caught it sooner? Didn't blame a fellow Democrats on a whole? How about blaming them in part? Is another audit a good idea? Probably, says Bill. But why wait? Klobuchar is a senior senator and a member of the most powerful legislative body on planet Earth. She's currently and has been a longtime member of the U.S. Senate's Judiciary Committee. If she was interested in being bipartisan, she could have joined her Republican colleague, Senator Josh Hawley, who have done great work in investigating Minnesota fraud and holding top Minnesota officials like current Governor Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison accountable. There's currently a vacancy on the federal district court for Minnesota. She should be working overtime to get that position filled with a tough-on-fraud judge under the Senate's blue slip system. She's the one person keeping that from happening. Or she could have insisted on hearings back in 22 and 23 when Democrats were in a majority and the fraud was out in the open. The closest that Amy Klobuchar has come to commenting on the fraud scandals was a press release on the resignation of Attorney Joe Thompson and his fraud prosecutors. And they're only mentioned in passing. She spent the bulk of her Senate career complaining about Ticketmaster or whatever it's called these days. Yeah, she's the senator of small things. I'm convinced that she does not want this gig. And based on her performance during this debate, it seemed pretty clear that she doesn't want this gig. Let me go here to this clip from yesterday and provide some commentary. Again, if you want to chime in, Jon.Justice at AmericanExperiment.org, or you can leave us a blast at 612-584-4565. Here's more of Amy Klobuchar from yesterday.
Not one of my opponents on this stage has objected to those tariffs. They've embraced them. Not one of them has objected to the war in Iran. Not one of them have objected to the big, beautiful bill and all the rural cuts. We do not need a governor who is a rubber stamp of Donald Trump. We need a governor. We need a governor who is going to put you first, who's going to put Minnesota first.
She's playing the hits. She's playing the hits to appeal to the base. She has no interest in seeking the truth on any of these particular issues, no interest in getting into the views and opinions on the tariffs, or even hearing directly from the farmers themselves over specifically. They're going to throw out, and they threw out a lot of different platitudes regarding the frustration. But it's funny because I haven't heard that coming and certainly didn't see any follow-up commentary from individuals there over this tariff issue. No, Trump is bad. Vote for me because I don't like Trump, just like you don't like Trump. It's the same hits that Angie Craig and Peggy Flanagan also played during the debates yesterday. I wanted to recap a little bit of what took place at Farm Fest, and I wanted to do this from the less point of view. So I pulled this article from National Boring Radio News, Dana Ferguson. I'll share with you a few of the comments, and I have some more audio to get to. Dana writes this, from the get-go, Klobuchar worked to show a been-there, done-that approach by citing measures that she's worked on in Congress, referencing places she's been in Minnesota, and the ideas put on the table this campaign. Lisa Damath said it's time to chart a new course for leadership by Democrats who've been in charge of Minnesota's executive branch since 2021. Mike Lindell, who stepped down as the CEO of MyPillow this week, put the stakes in more ominous terms. Here's a bit of what Mike Lindell had to say yesterday at Farm Fest.
And the president let me get up and speak, and I said something off the cuff. I said a nation had turned its back on God. We had taken God out of our schools. I said we need to pray for God's grace and get back in the Word and spend time with our families. I could have just well been talking about Minnesota. This is a spiritual battle of evil and good of biblical proportions. We have a governor that put a satanic statue in the Capitol. Put a satanic statue in there. All the evil and the horrific things that we've seen happen as we watch our state just crumble. And I will tell you this is Amy on this stage. We agreed in 2020, and we came into a historical agreement on the election fraud. She went after the machines. She named them in the movie Kill Chain. She named them, and she went after this fraud. But then she stopped after the 2020 election. What did Mike Lindell do since then? I spent $80 million trying to secure our elections in this country. What did Amy do since then? Amy went to Washington, brings back $20 billion to our state, only to have it shipped off to Somalia. That's not a good steward of our money.
All four candidates have said they would take a tough tack when responding to the fraud in state government programs. There were strong audience responses as candidates discussed how they would navigate the federal government as it relates to immigration enforcement. This was probably the clip that went most viral yesterday from Amy Klobuchar.
The people of Minnesota were ripped off. This was wrong, and it should have been caught earlier. When I found out, I put more resources into the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I was the one that recommended Andy Lugar, who is a prosecutor who exposed the fraud and was the one that brought 70 of these cases. My plan as governor will be to do this. One, the minute I get in there.
And my apologies, this is the clip that I wanted to play for you. That was one that I played earlier.
Amy. I've long believed and supported funding for order at the border, and I have worked well with law enforcement in Minnesota for years. But what Quiet. Wow. I ran the largest prosecutor's office in the state and was endorsed by police many, many times. So don't. Number two.
So don't.
None of my opponents on this stage condemned what ICE did. Not a word. Not a word. 2 innocent people were killed, shot in the back. We had many people arrested when they weren't supposed to be arrested, and we all know that, and we need reform to ICE. We must have reform.
I would have really expected her to be able to formulate her words better than she did. She came off in that moment, first off, getting the boos and jeers from the audience, of which she certainly didn't appreciate. This goes back to my commentary earlier about how this woman is absolutely beatable. Absolutely beatable. Whoever the GOP nominee is, they're getting my vote. Amy Klobuchar is simply a rubber stamp on everything that's come before her via Governor Dim Walz and the DFL here in the state. I have no doubt about that at all. But the fact that she kind of meandered and clumsily worked her way through the comments regarding ICE, and then even framing it the way that she did, in mentioning in passing, Preddy and Good, who were not innocent in all of this. They'd still be alive today if they hadn't gone and made the decision to go down there and obstruct law enforcement from what they were doing. And the same thing rings true as to why everybody else on that stage hasn't said anything negative about Operation Metro Surge, because I would hope that they agree with commentary from me and you and your opinion that the whole issue of what happened during Operation Metro Surge was a completely manufactured crisis that played out as the Democrats encouraged individuals to take to the streets and obstruct lawful law enforcement from doing their job. She doesn't want this gig. She doesn't want to hear the criticism. She has no interest in doing these debates. This is all above her, in my opinion. And that was abundantly clear in her commentary yesterday, especially in that moment right there that you heard where she's like, just don't. Almost to the rest of the audience, how dare you go and criticize me? I am Amy Klobuchar. Don't you know, the senator of small things?
Good morning, John. Still really great to have you back on the air. But we got Amy over there at Farm Fest yesterday. Oof, she does not want this gig. She never wanted it. We know that. She can't handle any scrutiny, any kind of pushback. She's going to vote for her opponent. She wants to go back to Washington where everybody ignores her. She can do nothing again. She doesn't want the governor job. I hope she doesn't get it.
Comments continue to roll into the blaster line this morning. Again, 612-584-4565. That's 612-584-4565. Let's go and hear from Ken here on the Jon Justice Show, presented by American Experiment.
As I listen to Amy Klobuchar tell what she's going to do about fraud, none of it involves the people in Minnesota. There were so many whistleblowers, and there's still so many out there, but they're not listening to the people. They think that the government will find the fraud. Thank God for the Nick Shirleys out there that are finding the fraud when it's right under our nose. She doesn't trust the citizens. She only trusts the internal puppets.
There were strong audience responses, according to the article that I'm pulling the information on from NPR, as candidates discussed how they would navigate working the federal government as it relates to immigration enforcement, as I mentioned. The Republican candidates took issue with the state and local elected leaders in the Twin Cities who said they didn't do enough to help the Trump administration apprehend people during the winter enforcement surge. Lindell agreed that he would help facilitate the transfer of people serving jail sentences in the state to federal officials. He also raised concerns about the local policies that prevent law enforcement from cooperating with federal immigration officials. Let me go back to the blaster line this morning. Again, 612-584-4565. And my apologies when I'm getting the names screwed up. I'm going off of the transcript here.
Hey, John, I was perusing X yesterday, and I came across an article where Dakota County is talking about a 14 to 29% tax increase. I've lived in Dakota County my whole life, and I've owned a house there for 23 plus years, and every year or every biennium my taxes go up. And all they do is give it to fraudsters. I'm going to be leaving this state. I think it's beyond the Rubicon.
Thank you for the comments. I hope you stay. There's a lot of people that are fighting to get this state turned around, and I believe that we can get the state turned around. Hopefully the outcomes are what we expect if the Republicans go and rally around the individuals who end up being the nominees after next Tuesday. We have opportunities. As I mentioned, when it comes to Amy Klobuchar, the woman's absolutely beatable, in my opinion. And she put that on full display yesterday. I have more audio to share coming up. We have some guests joining us in studio. We're going to have to move a few things around. So we're going to take a quick break. And hopefully we'll be talking with endorsed gubernatorial candidate Kendall Qualls here in just a moment. Also, Matt Dean, policy fellow here at American Experiment, will be joining us. And Representative Kristen Robbins at 8:30 this morning. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Jon Justice Show, presented by American Experiment.
By the way, the class of 2025 just posted the worst academic performance on record for a graduating cohort. But wait, that's while they earned, of course, the highest graduation rate ever. Record low academic performance. They can't read at grade level. They can't do math at grade level. The schools aren't teaching them anything, but they're still graduating in record numbers.
It's crazy. They do such a disservice. How do we expect them to be successful? We're just setting them up for failure, which is really sad.
All the special interests are represented in St. Paul. But who speaks for you? Center of the American Experiment does. Our policy fellows dig into the tough issues that matter to you and offer common sense solutions on education, taxes, crime, and energy. American Experiment is the trusted, nonpartisan voice of Minnesotans like you. We are working every day to make Minnesota a better, safer, more prosperous place. We are American Experiment. Go to americanexperiment.org to learn more.
I looked it up, and the percentage of children in poverty in Minnesota is about 10%, which is lower than the national average. So how come somewhere around a third, 33%, say, of children in Minnesota are on Medicaid if they aren't poor?
Sure, my kids are grown now, but I had 3 kids that I raised, and for us, we could make over $100,000 a year, and still our kids would be on Medicaid. If you can imagine that. That's middle class. That's crazy. And, we also as a state, I think we should really measure ourselves by how few people have to rely on the government for health care, not how many. Mm-hmm. But if you ask, Governor Walz, he'll say the more people we feed, the better. The more people on government programs, the better. And that's really how he measures the state. And we really see that in the numbers in Medicaid, which have just exploded.
Think about it. Black and Hispanic students in Mississippi perform better in reading and math than Black and Hispanic students in Minnesota. And Mississippi spends thousands of dollars less per student than Minnesota. Mississippi spends less money, gets better results, and their achievement gaps are closing, while ours are getting worse. Think about it. It's time for real education reform, so Minnesota can catch up to Mississippi. Think About It is brought to you by Center of the American Experiment, Minnesota's think tank.
You have to ask yourself, how in the heck can we be spending that much more money on Medicaid? And we're really looking into that because we think a lot of that money is going to people who are dead, people who live in other states, people who are on more than one program. And you are not surprised because you've seen that on so many different programs in the state of Minnesota. But Medicaid is by far the biggest enchilada when it comes to that.
That blows my mind.
Well, if you leave the state, they still get a check for you every month. And if you are covered by more than one program, or you get married and you're on your husband or wife's plan, they still get a check unless that is circumvented. So they have sort of a very vested interest in not finding it.
Hour 3 on the Jon Justice Show, presented by American Experiment and americanexperiment.org. Remember, you can listen at americanexperiment.org or on the MixLR app, and you can watch the show at MN Think Tank on X, also Facebook and YouTube under Center of the American Experiment. And if you missed any portion of the show, you can always check out the podcast that is available at the MixLR app or on wherever you go and listen to podcasts. We've been recapping Farm Fest and the debates that took place at the event yesterday, and very pleased to welcome into the show and on the couch here at American Experiment the endorsed GOP gubernatorial candidate Kendall Qualls, fresh off of Farm Fest. Good morning, Kendall. Thank you so much for joining us in the studio this morning.
Glad to be here. Thanks, John.
So, what are your biggest takeaways from Farm Fest this week? A huge event,
yep.
Incredibly popular event, really important when it comes to elections, which is why all of you were there. But what were your biggest takeaways from the events this week?
No, it's interesting you say that. So I'm actually going to be posting a video this morning. If you take away and reflect back on that, and you look at where the Republican Party has been in the last 20 years, on that stage we had 3 candidates from the Republican Party representing the 3 divisions, if you will, the fractured divisions of the Republican Party, and 1 candidate from the Democrat Party, unified. Even though their policies are a mess and where they've taken our state, we have to address a lot of that is because we have a party that's not unified behind what we want to accomplish and helping to save the state. That was the biggest thing. But the other part, each candidate made their points, but is it enough to win statewide? And that's why I think the delegates of the Republican Party chose me as their candidate because we don't have enough Republicans to win alone in the state. We need someone that can be a bridge to independent voters. And that's what we have right now with my campaign.
What do you think was, so you mentioned that, what do you think was missing, or what do you think is missing with the other candidates that that you can go and provide to the voters? What was that, what was absent yesterday in your mind, Kendall Qualls?
Again, I'm going to share this on my post. So we have Lisa Damath, who represents really the I would say the political establishment as you call it. But here's the thing. We have the vast majority of our candidates, even the candidates that are not endorsed, people want an outsider candidate, someone from outside politics. Lisa spent nearly $2 million on her PAC and her own campaign money, $2 million to convince fellow Republicans that she's their champion. $2 million, and the best we've ever gotten is 37% of support over Republicans. That's not a competitive statewide candidate. The base party will not be energized behind her in the general election. Now, Mike Lindell, good man, he's got a good heart. He wants best for our country, best for the state. I believe that. But we don't have enough Republicans in this state for him to win alone. In fact, there'll be some Republicans that won't vote for him. So he's not a bridge. I represent that one bridge that can energize the base. We got it and have already done it. But also be a bridge to independent voters that don't want to become part of that socialist movement. Those independents want something from the Republican Party that can actually they can reach out and grab to, and I'm that candidate. So how do you let's say that things go in your favor on a Tuesday, and you are the nominee right now, being the endorsed GOP candidate, talking with Kendall Qualls on the show. Amy Klobuchar yesterday, I don't want to provide too much of my commentary because I want to get your thoughts. Yeah. But, she certainly laid out all of the things that she wanted to do. She made her views known about, having an audit regarding fraud and, making sure that we're tackling crime, although she seemed to lean into an idea of stripping away some funding from ICE. But she seems to be playing all the hits to her base of the things that she wants to do to tackle these major issues. As a matter of fact, at AmericanExperiment.org, and we'll do this during our interview. They have their Wrong Track Minnesota and the key things, a few key metrics that are indisputable regarding issues that we're faced with. How do you counter Amy saying what she's saying to her base, playing those hits to her base, knowing full well that they've done a very, very good job of villainizing anybody on the right? And what I mean, and again, I'm being really kind of convoluted here, and I'll just basically boil it down to, how do you counter Amy Klobuchar's claims of what she's going to do to help the state when they actually sound very similar to what Republican candidates, even like yourself, say that you want to do to help put the state back on track? Well, look, at this point in the juncture, Minnesota's at a point where even Democrats are saying, boy, this is a bridge too far. Yes, we hear the political yak from Amy Klobuchar, promises, but they realize from their pocketbook issues, the crime in Minneapolis, and where our schools are, that all of those have been responsible and guided by Democrats, not Republicans. The state of where we are is because of Democrats. So they're not going to pay. They're going to pay that little lip service. The critical issue is us. Now, here's the most, I would say, the most critical point to look at. If we don't get the turnout that we need and we wind up putting someone on the ticket that is a drag on the ticket, we could have a Scott Jensen 2.0, where the Democrats get another trifecta because it's that close. They have only a 1-seat majority in the Senate. They already have the Senate. All they need to get is 1 seat in the House. And we will not be able to go on offense. I believe I can help us go on offense, so we pick up a seat and we can actually capture 2 seats in the Senate. They're not going to have the turnout for Mike Lindell. God bless him, good man, heart's in the right place. Lisa has not been able to demonstrate. If you got to spend $2 million to convince Republicans to vote for you, man, there's more ads and mailers for her, for Lisa Damith, than there are My Pillow commercials. I'm going like, wow. If it takes that much to convince Republicans to vote for you, there's not enough money to do that in the general election.
Let's talk a little bit about immigration. I have a couple of stories that I want to get into coming up on the show before we end the show today. We do know that there's going to be this facility reopening for Appleton, and actually the community in Appleton is very pleased that they're going to be using this facility to U.S. and Immigration and Customs Enforcement to house some 600 detainees, and we'll get some details on that. But I wanted to get your thoughts on immigration. You had Amy Klobuchar making comments regarding how nobody on the stage, apart from her, called out what happened with ICE and Metro Surge. I'm not surprised by that. I talked about it earlier. But you also had Mike Lindell cause quite a stir with his idea to provide essentially some pathway to citizenship for individuals that are here illegally. So two-part question here, Kendall Qualls. One, what are your thoughts on Operation Metro Surge and what took place? Because I don't think you and I have talked about that yet. And then two, what are your thoughts on what Mike Lindell had proposed? I mean, it garnered a lot of headlines. I believe they pulled the plan down from online, but I am curious to get your thoughts on that as well.
Oh, yeah. So whenever people talk about immigration, I always reset the conversation to what it really is.
Okay.
Immigration is not, we have a legal immigration program. What you're talking about is illegal immigration, mass migration. What President Biden did in his administration, we had 10 to 15 million people come in 38 months from 100 different countries. That's borderline treason. They were unvetted. We have no idea where most of these people are. So we start from that framework. The second part of this is, look, I remember back when President Reagan tried to work with Democrats to do this. He provided amnesty, and they pulled the rug on him. It was classic Charlie Brown and Lucy pulling the football away. We got sideswiped. We can't do that again, especially when you bring in so many people into the country and into our state. Now, so when it comes to Operation Surge, look, and I said this on stage, with a strong leader in that seat, you wouldn't need to do a surge. We would take care of these problems. The federal government wouldn't need to get into place. Yeah. And at the end of the day, it is Governor Walz and our teenage Mayor Fry that have blood on their hands for what happened to those two individuals. Because no other state, not even a Democrat state, had those type of fatalities when they were doing Operation Surge across the country, because they collaborated with federal officials.
Talking with Kendall Qualls, again, the endorsed gubernatorial candidate for the GOP. Before we get into, I'm going to let you pick your own adventure of the list of the different ways in which Minnesota is on the wrong track. You can find this at AmericanExperiment.org, and I've been asking this to all the candidates who've joined us ahead of the primary. But we are closing in on the final days of the cycle leading into to the primary. Kendall, how are you doing personally? How is this campaign differed from the other times that you've run? And, you know, what is your mood as we look towards these final days and people go and make a decision on Tuesday? I'm kind of curious where your head is at right now, Kendall.
Well, the previous campaigns I've run, it is all about awareness. I mean, look, I'm a novice. I don't believe no one wakes up and thinks about when they go to school or college, I want to be a politician. I want to just go out there and just promise everything and spend my days combating this. I know I didn't. You know what? I wanted to have a traditional American life where I raise my family, have my kids be productive. And at a certain point, when you love the country and you see some things happening that shouldn't be happening, you can either keep complaining, which I'm not a whiner and I don't live my life that way, or you can do something. I decided to do something. And I can tell you, based on the previous campaigns and where I'm at now, the name awareness, the exposure, at every time I get a chance to speak in front of an audience, I win people that were on for other candidates. The biggest issue is getting the awareness out there. That's the biggest challenge we've had.
So let's go here. Minnesota's facing challenges, right? We have a list of items. We know the Minnesotans can feel that the state isn't doing well, some 68%,
right,
according to the polling from American Experiment and AmericanExperiment.org. It shows that. On the website, these items are listed. There are 5 different items, and there's data connected to every single one. These are all fact-based statements. I'll list all 5, and Kendall Qualls, you choose your own adventure. You tell me which one you want to comment on, okay?
All right.
So, kids in Mississippi can read better than kids in Minnesota. Minnesota is now a below-average state economically. 55% of Minnesota students cannot do math at a grade level. Minnesota taxes small businesses more than any other state, and Minnesota's government let fraudsters steal over $9 billion. Which one would you like to address?
Well, let's do the economy. What is it, below?
Yeah, so Minnesota is now a below-average state economically.
Yeah, because below average economically, it actually speaks to 2 other economic issues: the fraud as well as the taxes. When James Carville said it was the economy stupid, under Bill Clinton as his advisor, that transcends political parties and it transcends time. When people feel like they can't achieve their dreams, they're struggling hard economically, it impacts everything else. Why are they struggling economically? Because the taxes are too high, because the job opportunities are not there. You know, all the other, because I'm sending my kids to private school because the public schools are too terrible. All of these things were happening at one juncture in our state. And I said this on the stage yesterday. People are leaving our state not just because the Democrats have ruined the state, it's because Republicans haven't stopped them. They've given up on both parties. This is the reason I'm in this race, is because we need something from outside the standard that we've been doing for the last 20 years.
You going to be able to get any sleep between now and Tuesday?
Well, you know what? It's interesting you say that, because you know what, we are in the red zone. But last night, even after Farm Fest, I slept well. When you know you've done all you can do,
yeah,
and your message is resonating for the people that you can reach, that gives you hope. And when I speak to those guys, they tell the same thing to me. They said, you know what, Kendall, you give me hope.
Kendall Qualls, endorsed gubernatorial candidate for the GOP. Thank you so much for stopping by this morning. Not a very long walk if you're over at the offices today, but either way, feel free to come on by whenever you like. Thank you so much for coming by this morning. Good luck between now and certainly Tuesday, and it was great to speak with you this morning.
Thank you, John. Take care.
Coming up, El Said's primary victory signals clear leftward shift in Democrats' health on politics. A man whose opinion I very, very much respect is a policy fellow, Matt Dean. He's actually in his office behind me. I'm going to go and grab him and put him on the American Experiment couch. We'll talk a bit about his piece here. And it gives me the opportunity to dive into this. I'm really curious to get into Matt's thought on this rise of the Democrat socialists across the country and how they have been winning these elections, and also whether or not this means that the GOP stands better chances in these races than if the voters in these states had gone with a more traditional Democrat candidate. Although right now to say traditional Democrat candidate really does mean that these are the far leftist socialists. So we'll talk with Matt Dean here in just a moment on the show. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Jon Justice Show, presented by American Experiment.
If something sounds too good to be true, it usually is. We've heard over and over that wind and solar are the clean and green solution to our energy needs. Power without the downsides of fossil fuels. It sounds great on the surface, but is it true? Let's take a closer look. Every form of energy impacts the environment. Wind and solar are no exception. The only difference? You've probably never been told about their downsides. Wind and solar are both low-power energy sources that require exponentially more wind and solar farms to produce the same amount of power as nuclear or natural gas. This means greater material needs, which lead to unparalleled levels of mining, manufacturing, transportation, and construction, all of which come with huge environmental harms. The land use alone is environmentally devastating. A 1 gigawatt nuclear plant takes about 1.3 square miles. Solar, up to 75 square miles. Wind, up to 3,000 square miles. Powering the U.S. with just wind would require more land than 2 Californias. Then there's the materials. Meeting global net zero targets would require massive amounts of minerals, far more than the world currently produces. This means opening new mines, often in countries with weak environmental standards, dangerous working conditions, and even child labor. The impacts on wildlife are no better. Offshore wind disrupts marine ecosystems. Whales, for example, which rely on echolocation, suffer from hearing impairment and disturbed migration patterns. On land, turbines kill birds and bats, and solar farms destroy habitats. Then there's lifespan. Nuclear and natural gas plants can last 60 to 80 years. Turbines and solar panels, just 20 to 25. They're also not easily recyclable. So multiply the sheer number of units we'd need with their short lifespan, and you have millions of tons of material waste heading for landfills. The truth is, wind and solar aren't the magical solution we've been promised. The costs are real, the trade-offs significant. Low power, high material needs, extensive land use and ecosystem impact. Wind and solar energy production literally do more environmental harm than good. Like we said, if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Learn more at americanexperiment.org/shatteredgreendreams.
It's the Jon Justice Show presented by American Experiment and AmericanExperiment.org. Remember, you can listen at AmericanExperiment.org or on the MixLR app. Also, watch at MN Think Tank on X and Facebook and YouTube at the Center of the American Experiment page as well. And for those of you, I know we'll be having a little bit of audio issues this morning. We're still working that out today, so we're adjusting the levels as appropriate, and I appreciate everybody who has emailed in. Just let me know that your concerns are not going ignored. So we're dealing with the issues this morning. I'm very pleased to welcome to the show. Matt Dean is your title. I keep saying policy fellow. Is that right, or do you have a different title here at Center of the American Experiment?
That is it.
That is it.
Policy fellow.
How does it feel to be a policy? I wonder how can I be bestowed policy fellow at some point? I guess talk show.
Absolutely not.
It's my job. No. Is there a strict requirement to receive that title?
There's a process.
Okay.
There's a process. Yeah.
So you provided me an opportunity to talk about something that I hadn't planned on discussing today in the midst of everything that's been going on. But the El Said primary victory, I want to get into the piece that you wrote today at AmericanExperiment.org, where you can go and check it out. But also a little bit of a broader commentary over what's been happening with Democrats going and electing these Democrat socialists. But let's key in on some of the thoughts that you had via El Said's primary victory and his thoughts on health care. I'll just read your words back to you, because I thought this made me laugh a little bit. The UAW's Cadillac healthcare plans could go the way of the Pontiac Aztec if candidates like Abdul El Said keep winning, and that has many Democrats worried about the riptide developing in their blue wave plans for November. I saw a clip yesterday from Chuck Schumer, and he was asked about the rise of these Democrat socialists. And he said, well, we're a big tent party. We welcome everybody into the party. So first off, are you seeing more Democrats raising concern over these Democrat socialists? I know we've seen a smattering of it, but what have sort of you seen? And do you think their voices are going to be able to rise above the fact that these individuals are winning these primaries under the Democrat banner, but they're certainly socialists?
Well, that is certainly the greenest grass on the Democrat side of the fence right now. Is they're socialists, and they're running as socialists sometimes under DSA, sometimes not in the case of El Said. But that is who is winning. If you are not connected to the establishment, if you are not connected to AIPAC and Israel, if you are not connected to money, that is really ascendant on that side, and that is freaking them out. And that's why Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, came out against him. That is why the outgoing senator who he would like to replace endorsed Stevens, who is awesome as a comedic figure, that they displaced. But all of the money, he was outspent 7-1. The governor, the outgoing senator, and Barack Obama, who she started out her career helping, they wanted him to come in and endorse her. She's a congresswoman. And he said, I'm going to stay out of this one. And he was very careful to not get in the middle of that one when the establishment clearly did not want this cat to win. And he is a different kind of Democrat and very, very radical, very, very much anti-establishment. So the establishment Democrats didn't want him in. And if it can happen there, it can happen here in Minnesota, too. So that is an interesting race. He won by 1 point. He was outspent 7-1. And he doesn't seem like he is going to become timid anytime soon.
How much of it do you think it comes down to the region and this being a primary? I mean, like how much of this victory can we extrapolate from and apply it to other races around the country beyond the concern? And I share with you the concern. I mean, there certainly is. He's not the only one who has risen to prominence under the DSA banner. But I'm just curious your perspective on how much of this was more indicative of this particular race in this particular region that may not be applicable to nationwide.
Well, it feels a whole lot like it does here.
Yeah.
If you look at where his votes came from, they came from downwardly mobile, affluent, overeducated people. So if that was in Minnesota, he would just blow away Kenwood. He would clean up around the lakes. And those kind of people were voting for him in Michigan. There's a lot of crossovers, so it makes sense that the people who like Ilhan in Minnesota are the people who like him there. This very overeducated, cool cat, liberal, anti-Israel crowd is very much ascendant. So I see a lot of crossover. The difference is this guy says that people in insurance are parasites. You think, wow, this guy that's kind of, volatile.
Yeah.
To call a group of people providing health insurance parasites. The guy graduated from medical school at Columbia. He also is a Rhodes Scholar, so he's not your typical bomb-throwing Democrat. He knows exactly what he's saying. He's showing up at these rallies. He's got a rallying cry that says, money out of politics, money in your pocket, Medicare for all. And his crowds are finishing his talking points, which should be scary to both Republicans and Democrats, because this guy is not your average unhinged fringe candidate.
Talking with policy fellow here at AmericanExperiment.org, Matt Dean. Part of the problem I think that we have right now with this rise of these Democrat socialists is that it's a very complicated issue, and it's one that I'm not sure how we tackle when you consider that so many of the individuals that are supporting these candidates are individuals who have come out of the public education system. They've come out of the university system. They haven't been taught to anything different. They've been indoctrinated at a very early age for this very specific reason. And now we're seeing the fruits of the Democrat Party's labor come to fruition. The question is whether or not it ends up eating the Democrat Party as a whole, which is distressing when you see comments from Chuck Schumer welcoming all these individuals in, because you have to wonder, does he not realize that if these individuals continue to grow in power within the party, the Democrat Party as we used to know it will be completely gone? And that includes individuals like him as well. It's a very complicated issue, and one that's only going to grow because of the fact that our education system isn't changing. We're going to have more and more of these voting age young people coming out of education willing to go and support candidates like this. And I'm not sure what the counter to that is yet, Matt Dean.
Well, I think candidates in Michigan, Mike Rogers, who's a good candidate, will have a real opportunity. If you say to Chuck Schumer, if you want to adopt a grizzly bear cub and bring him in, great. But I think he might grow a little bit, and you might want to watch out, because this is a dangerous cat. And if he looks at it and has it as an opportunity, I'm one of three boys. We all married. girls whose dads were union folks and who retired, had great careers and retired as union members. And they have an opportunity if he shows up in Michigan and says at the Labor Day picnic, your health care is going away. He will absolutely get rid of it. You will not have Cadillac health care plans. You will not have access to private health insurance if he is successful. Listen to what he says. That is what he is saying. And that presents a real opportunity to connect with, in Michigan, labor. There's 200,000 votes that he could absolutely pry away from the Democrats if he makes that case and makes it at a very, very disciplined way and goes after those votes and asks for them. And I think that that's a real opportunity that he could win that seat in Michigan. And the Republicans are going to need that if they want to maintain control, because it's going to be very, very tight.
Yeah, the only thing really, and good's not the right word. I'm trying to find a silver lining in all of this. But this battle that we're faced with now of what's become to the Democrat Party, it's been almost inevitable, right, based off of everything that I mentioned before. And now that it's out in the open, because it used to be that these socialists would kind of hide behind other labels, and we've seen them slowly stripping away as they've been gaining support, being more genuine and authentic. I agree with the guest that we had yesterday, Becca Thompson, a social media influencer, and she follows what's been going on in Minneapolis closely, that these individuals are really more aligned with communism than they are anything else. The good news is that, okay, we're now having the conversation. The policies are being exposed. They're not hiding behind any of this. And once again, it feels like this election is going to be another crossroads for the American public heading into 2028, wherein we're going to have to decide as a nation, which way do we want to go now? These Democrat socialists are being very honest. There was a clip from Fox News of an avowed Democrat socialist who was straight up talking about what their policies are. They're the most extreme of the extreme. So I think it's good that we're having this conversation. I think it's good that it's out in the open. But of course, the scary part is, are we going to, as a country, be able to go and reject this to keep these individuals from achieving power? Because I think you know the outcome. If they do get into power, we're going to see firsthand the disastrous impacts of these policies, and history is going to repeat itself all over again. But from in that front, as I filibuster here, Matt Dean, I'm glad that we're having the conversation. I just don't know where all this is heading.
Well, I think if you're a candidate like Betty McCollum, 72 years old and incumbent in a dark blue area, it's seats like that around the country that are being flipped by DSA candidates. If Amy Klobuchar was challenged at her endorsing convention by Ilhan Omar or another candidate like that, I think she would have had great trouble in today. And so, yeah, you can't automatically assume that people are not going to vote for crazy unless you tell them why crazy is not good for them. So that's really the job of Republicans, to get out and get sharp on it. Because this guy is... if he is the tip of that spear, I tell you, the Republicans have something to worry about, because you can't assume that people aren't going to vote for that.
Policy fellow here at American Experiment, AmericanExperiment.org, Matt Dean. I encourage everybody to go and check out your latest piece. El Sayed's primary victory signals clear leftward shift in Democrat health politics. Thank you so much for taking the couch this morning. I'll let you go back to your office. Good to talk with you. Coming up in just a moment here on the show, very pleased to welcome in, sitting in that very seat, State Representative Kristen Robbins. We have a number of different issues we'll talk about with Kristen Robbins, including a bit of Farm Fest and the debates that took place yesterday. Also, I want to go back a bit as well, back to early June and that House Oversight Committee report. Plus, there is a piece by Bill Glahn today that we'll discuss. Ellison disputes the KSTP fraud recovery numbers before admitting that he has no idea what they actually are. So a lot of ground to cover in the final half hour of the Jon Justice Show, presented by American Experiment. And as we talk about the education system and what's happened in the classroom, there's a fantastic series of videos by Grace Keating here at American Experiment of Coming to the Classroom. If you haven't had a chance to check some of these out, here's a preview of what you can find at the American Experiment YouTube page.
In this week's episode of Coming to a Classroom Near You, we look at the new requirement to teach ethnic studies in all K-12 schools in Minnesota, which must be implemented in 2026. Ethnic studies includes 3 distinct standards: identity, resistance, and ways of knowing and methodologies. The resistance standard takes learning to a whole new level. It requires students to describe how individuals and communities have fought for liberation against systemic exercises of power and organize with others to engage in such activities. The Ways of Knowing standard requires students to understand the roots of contemporary systems of oppression and apply lessons from the past that could eliminate contemporary injustices. Within these standards are K-12 grade-level benchmarks that represent the specific knowledge and/or skill a student must accomplish. Since there is no external approval process on the benchmarks, the Minnesota Department of Education writes whatever content it wants and then distributes it to schools to teach. For example, kindergartners, 5-year-olds, will have to retell a story about an unfair experience that conveys a power imbalance, and will no longer have to describe symbols, songs, and traditions that identify our nation and state, such as the American flag, bald eagle, Pledge of Allegiance, and Minnesota state flag. First graders, 6-year-olds, must identify examples of ethnicity, equality, liberation, and systems of power, and construct meanings for those terms, and will no longer have to explain why and when the Pledge of Allegiance is recited, or provide examples of basic flag etiquette. Fourth graders, 10-year-olds, must identify the processes and impacts of colonization and examine how discrimination and the oppression of various racial and ethnic groups have produced resistance movements, and will no longer have to name and locate countries neighboring the United States, like Canada and Mexico, and their major cities. We shouldn't be surprised by these changes. The Minnesota Department of Education's controlling document explicitly states this is an intentional shift and reframing of the entire approach to K-12 social studies education used in Minnesota schools. MDE claims the 2011 social studies standards and benchmarks are deficient because they organize student learning around content. While MDE acknowledges that content knowledge sometimes plays a role, in general it intends to replace our school's current content-based approach to instruction with what it calls inquiry-based pedagogy. Under this approach, students are asked to construct their own meaning based on asking difficult questions, instead of mastering specific factual knowledge. Again and again throughout the benchmarks, MDE's central theme is clear: replacing content with ideology disguised as inquiry-based pedagogy. When ethnic studies was presented to the Minnesota legislature in 2023, it was portrayed as the study of different cultures, students seeing themselves in the curriculum, and learning honest history. But like so many other familiar terms, Minnesota's version of ethnic studies has been hijacked to apply a liberated approach to understanding our world. Minnesota students deserve a robust education that includes learning hard historical truths and frank discussions on where our country has fallen short, not one that is confined to a narrow, politicized, and ideological worldview. Recently, California rejected a statewide ethnic studies mandate because it was too divisive. How will Minnesota respond? To learn more about Minnesota's ethnic studies standards, visit americanexperiment.org/ethnic studies.
It's the Jon Justice Show, presented by American Experiment. Glad you're with the program this morning. Remember, if you missed any portion of today's broadcast, you can check out the podcast. It's available up where you can listen to the show live on the MixLR app. The podcasts are loaded there as well. And on all podcast platforms, you can watch the show at MN Think Tank. Also on Facebook and YouTube. And the videos are always posted after the show as well. And throughout the show, every morning, 6 until 9, you can leave us a blast, a comment based off of the topics on the show. We call it the Blaster Line, and that number is 612-584-4565. Let's go back and hear from you this morning on the Jon Justice Show, presented by American Experiment.
Morning, John Gonzo. I can't agree with you more about Amy Klobuchar. She doesn't want the job. And the reason she doesn't want the job is because as a senator in D.C., she can disappear and stay under the radar. But if she becomes governor, she's going to be on the front stage and going to have to account for any problems or issues that come up. She can be anonymous in D.C., but she'd be on the front page in Minnesota. That's why she doesn't want the job. Have a good day, guys.
Thank you, as always, for the comment, Brian. Again, 612-584-4565. And let's take that, and we'll invite in our next guest who's on the couch here at American Experiment, State Representative, former gubernatorial candidate, Kristen Robbins. Good morning, Kristen. It's great to see you, and thank you so much for coming on the show this morning.
Thanks for having me.
So yesterday at Farm Fest, and I'm curious to get your thoughts, I'd been, I think like a lot of us, waiting to see how Amy Klobuchar was going to go and handle the debate. She hasn't been talking a lot about her candidacy. She doesn't really have to. She's kind of been anointed to the position. My takeaway, and again, I'm biased, right? I'm not a fan of Amy Klobuchar. I'm certainly not voting for her in this election. But she kind of leaned into how I felt about her candidacy this whole time. I don't really think that she wants this job. And I think that she's absolutely beatable. She came off as angry yesterday, came off as a little entitled and arrogant. And honestly, I really haven't seen her act otherwise, but it seemed to be amplified yesterday and this week at Farm Fest. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on Amy Klobuchar and her candidacy and what will more likely be her being the nominee for the DFL for governor.
Yes, I totally agree. She's absolutely beatable. And I agree with your sentiment that she doesn't seem passionate about wanting the job. Being governor is very different than being a senator. And she is going to have to lead and own decisions in a way she's never had to do in the U.S. Senate as one of 100. And so I think she will encounter opposition she's never had to face. And I mean, it's clear that this was a setup to sort of coordinate her. She pushed back when there was some effort to have a progressive candidate challenge her for the nomination back at the DFL convention. And so she wanted just sort of a walk in the park, and being governor is not a walk in the park for either party. And I think she's in for a rude awakening.
She mentioned yesterday a series of things that she wanted to do to tackle fraud. But as Bill Glahn reported at AmericanExperiment.org this morning, and it was going to be part of my commentary, and certainly you had a hand in this, a lot of what she was suggesting has already kind of been implemented on a number of different fronts, correct?
Absolutely, yes. It's laughable to me how she talks about fraud. There's an old meme out there from a few years ago about the hot dog man who runs his car into the store and then says, "Oh, whose fault was it?" Right? And it just seems like that is what she's saying. She all along didn't hold Tim Walz responsible or Peggy Flanagan responsible for the Walz-Flanagan fraud that's been run rampant and been very public. And when I testified in the Senate Judiciary Committee, her committee, and it was a very important hearing on fraud in her state, she ghosted the hearing. She didn't even bother to show up. So she has not put any effort into holding her Democrat partners accountable, and I don't think she'll do any different. She's not going to stand up to her political base when she's governor to stop the fraud. She is absolutely not going to do it.
You are the chair, talking with State Representative Kristen Robbins, chair of the House Fraud Prevention and State Agency Oversight Committee. I know we had a report that came out in June that we can kind of go back to that laid out in very, in plain language exactly what we've been faced with in terms of fraud. Let's back up, though. Where are we right now in tackling the fraud? I know a lot was done during the legislative session. I know that, the DFL pushed back on some of what the GOP wanted to do, but there was some items that were implemented, as we've been talking about. Where is the issue of tackling the fraud now in your mind here in the state of Minnesota? Are we making progress?
We are absolutely making progress, and we will continue. I mean, even though the legislature is not in session, I continue to deal with fraud every week. I have whistleblowers continuing to come forward. We are doing investigations and multiple new potential vectors of fraud. I continue to work with our federal partners regularly. So the work of stopping the fraud hasn't slowed down. And secondly, our federal partners are continuing with investigations, with indictments, criminal prosecutions. I think we're up to 113 or 115 indictments and more than 80 convictions or guilty pleas. So the work of stopping the fraud continues. And we will, the next legislature, we passed some good bills this session to tighten up fraud and when they can stop payment for credible allegations of fraud. We have the new whistleblower law, which is expanding whistleblower protection. And importantly, we passed the Independent Office of Inspector General within the executive branch, which will be an independent law enforcement agency to look over all executive branch agencies. And my understanding is that, they're beginning the process of looking to take recommendations and applications for that job. And so hopefully that person will be in place in January.
Now, who ultimately decides? Is it a bipartisan effort? Who decides who that individual will be?
Yes. So my understanding is that there will be a slate of people recommended bipartisanly and bicamerally from the legislature to the new governor. They'll, I think, send up 3 recommendations. So the governor has to pick from what the legislature has recommended, and then that person has to be confirmed by the Senate.
Okay.
And importantly, that person can be fired by the Senate, not the governor. So they're protected from being fired by the governor.
I feel like I haven't heard that up until now, and I only bring that up because, and maybe, as we head into the primary, once we get past the primary, we can look at addressing this further. But that's an important sticking point. I think that's important for voters to know that when it comes to tackling the fraud, if those decisions are being made within the legislature and the bodies like the Senate are the ones that are going to ultimately decide who will be the individual tasked with getting to the root of this, that is a crucial talking point for whoever the nominees are moving forward to encourage individuals to get out to vote. And I certainly think it's something that we hear more often. I'm not going to criticize anybody because, again, we're heading towards a primary. People are focused on their individual campaigns, but it's going to be turnout. It's going to be turnout when we in November. That's what we're going to need in order to win these elections. That's a really, really big sticking point as to why we need to make sure that we get control and the Democrats do not get control. Because if they do, I think we know what will happen in terms of the individuals that they may pick to go and lead in tackling the fraud, because they're not going to want to go and expose the fact that they were largely, responsible for the fact that the fraud is occurring in the first place. So that's a really, really important point for voters to know.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, all these elections matter. Who controls the legislature, the House, and the Senate really matters. The governor's race matters. These Senate races matter. Like, Minnesota can be the firewall to stop socialism that we see creeping across the country, from New York to California and now Michigan. There's a big primary in Wisconsin next week for the governor's race, just like we have our primary. But Minnesota can be the firewall if we get the turnout. So I encourage everyone to go vote.
There was I want to play a clip from, just curious to get your thoughts, talking with State Representative Kristen Robbins from the debate yesterday. Peggy Flanagan had some comments to make regarding health care. Okay, let me share this with you from the debate yesterday.
So this is one of the number one things that I hear about when I travel across Minnesota, the high cost of health care. I talked to a farmer in Canby who has a $16,000 deductible, which is untenable. And they paid, I think it was $600 for a 5-minute med check. That's outrageous. Too many Minnesotans are paying for health insurance and not actually receiving health care. I believe in Medicare for all, certainly. And on our way to get there, I think we have to get rid of prior authorization. Because here's the deal. Some dude behind a desk shouldn't be able to decide whether or not you get the life-saving health care that your doctor has prescribed. Or worse yet, AI making that decision. We can absolutely do better. And these cuts to Medicaid in the big ugly bill, what those have done has forced rural hospitals to think, to close, rural clinics. We can do better. And we know that the local economy is taking a hit, again, in exchange for what? Tax breaks for people at the very top, not the folks in this room who don't need.
There's a real tragedy in this, and that is there's no follow-up when these comments are made. There's no context. She provides this example. Who knows if it's true or not? There's no thought on how we're going to pay for Medicaid for all if they move forward. And when it comes to this idea that she says, some dude behind a desk shouldn't be able to decide if you're getting life-saving health care or not, Listen, we have programs and stipulations and requirements in place for a reason. As somebody who's dealt with his fair share of healthcare issues, I've been through that process, and those processes are safeguards for those individuals receiving that healthcare. But they're playing the hits. Angie Craig said something similar. They want this Medicaid for all, and I'm just curious to get your instinctive reaction to Peggy Flanagan's thoughts there, Kristen Robbins.
I mean, Medicare for all is a disaster, and it is part of this socialism that we are seeing on so many fronts, where they want to take over increasing layers of the private sector economy. They want to take over healthcare, education, housing, and that leads to less quality and poor outcomes across the board. We saw that when they tried rent control. It's a disaster for the government to run these programs. What we need, I'm an economist, what we need is more price transparency. The problem in the healthcare market is that we've lost the connection between what people pay and the services they get, because you go to the doctor, you have no idea till after the fact what the prices are, and you cannot shop around. There's no market forces working in the healthcare market right now. So what we need is more private sector providers. We need more price transparency so people can shop. And other states are doing this. I tried to work on this following a New Hampshire model where people can go online and shop for the kind of elective procedures. And it really is helping, because you can, based on quality, based on availability, based on how far it is from your house, based on outcomes, you can say, oh, I want to go here for my hip replacement. I want to try this place for the mammogram or whatever. And we need more price signals in the market, not less. And if government runs this, all of our taxes are going to go up, and the quality and the accessibility will go down.
You are preaching to the choir. I couldn't agree with you more. There was an ad, and I've used this example before, but years ago, there was this ad that was running on a radio station that I was working at, and it was, when banks compete, you win. And I always think the same thing when it comes to our healthcare. We need to bring about more quality competition to drive these costs down. Going the route that they want to go is not the solution. We know what happens. It's why people come to America to get their health care, and they don't go to other places. For crying out loud, let me just give you a story. I completely forgot about this. So my son Logan is a pilot, and he is part of this MSP Live, where they go down and they film the planes that are coming in. They're all experts on the airliners. That's way beyond my knowledge, because he's just a flying enthusiast. There was a dictator that came to Minnesota yesterday. I don't know if you're aware of this. So he came. The footage is available up on YouTube if you go to MSP Live. He has this lavish airliner, custom painted, adorned with all of these, graphics on the side of it. Right. I don't know which country he was from. I bring it up. He was coming here to go to the Mayo Clinic. Right. That's why he was coming here to Minnesota. This dictator traveled from his home country overseas here to Minnesota, more than likely to get the health care for himself or somebody that he knows at the Mayo Clinic, in Rochester. He's doing that for a reason. It's because we don't have the things that Peggy Flanagan and Angie Craig were out there touting when it comes to our health care system. And so it gave me the opportunity to mention that. Do you think we're closer to having that to having that happen? It seems like the fight is really keeping something like Medicaid for all or Medicare for all from coming to fruition, and it's not trying to fundamentally sort of change the healthcare system to provide more competition.
Well, if Democrats get full control, they're not hiding it at all. They want Medicare for all here in Minnesota, and they want a state-run health plan. So they want everybody to be on MNsure. And that will really harm Minnesotans in terms of cost and quality. But to your point about the person coming from overseas, that happens a lot from people from Canada. My husband's grandfather came for an elective surgery because he could get it done in the States within a couple months, and in Canada he was going to have to wait more than 6 months. And I hear that story regularly because we have family in Canada, but also for the dictator who came, right? So in his country, I don't know what the healthcare system is, but it certainly wasn't good enough for him. And that's what happens in socialism. The so-called proletariat gets everything equalized at a very low level, but the rich people in power get to live like kings. And that's been the story of socialism for 100 years or more, and that would happen. You see this increasing bifurcation between people who have access and power and take advantage of it, and then everybody else who's got equality.
Before we wrap up our conversation this morning, talking with State Representative Kristen Robbins, I want to talk a little paid family medical leave because I want to get your thoughts. First off, we know that they're not going to be raising the taxes next year, but they're already forecasting that they're going to have to raise that tax in 2028. A lot of speculation, myself included, that that's only because it's an election year.
Absolutely.
Is that your thought as well, that they're simply not raising the tax on businesses because it's an election year? And what does that mean for paid family medical leave if we're already running out of money? They're already thinking about raising the taxes, but they're going to delay it a year. I don't want to see that go up, but at the same time, what does that mean for the program itself?
Right. No, the program's in trouble. And this is absolutely forced, unforced error. So when they planned the program, we forced them to do an actuarial study in October of 2023. And that study showed the break-even point for the payroll tax was going to be 0.92% of payroll. Well, they originally wanted the program to start at 0.7% of payroll. They eventually started at 0.88% of payroll. So they started the program in the red on purpose, knowing the tax would not be sufficient. And now here we are, they're leaving it at 0.88 because it's an election year. So they're increasing the debt in the program. The only reason it's not technically in the red is because they started some of our $18 billion surplus. Everyone remembers how we thought we were going to get our money back. No, instead they started a fund to help cover the deficit in the paid family leave program, $680 million or something like that. But as that money dissipates, that program will be further in the red. So it's complete Democrat mismanagement. From the beginning, they started the program knowing it was in the red.
We'll wrap up on this. I said Bill Glahn earlier. I was mistaken. It was John Phelan here at American Experiment who has a piece today. Attorney General Keith Ellison's office announced $90 million in Medicaid fraud recoveries since 2019. However, a KSTP investigation revealed that only $3 million of the $32 million in restitution ordered has actually been paid back. Ellison's office stated that they do not track the restitution collections, attributing the responsibility to the probation system and the courts. So essentially, Ellison disputes KSTP's fraud recovery numbers, and then he admits that he really has no idea what they actually are. This doesn't come as a surprise to me, and I'm sure it doesn't come as a surprise to you either, Kristen Robbins.
No, we've been very disappointed in the response from the Attorney General. I sent a letter to him in March of last year asking similar questions because he claims to have done all this recovery of $90 million in fraud, but when you ask for the data, his office will not provide it. So they want to claim credit for all this money coming back, but it's actually not coming back. And so I asked for, the resolution of the cases, how many got sentences. The KSTP report was great on how many sentences are actually minimal, if anything. So people are getting away with fraud, having a slap on the wrist. And so there's no deterrent effect. So yeah, I've been trying to get this data from the Attorney General's office since last March, and he's ghosted us. But clearly, he is not living up to his responsibility. When we've had, an estimate of $9 billion in fraud just in Medicaid, that doesn't count SNAP, that doesn't count Feeding Our Future, that doesn't count all these other fraudulent areas, and the recovery is $3 million. Like, it's shameful.
Yeah. And I know it's frustrating for the friends of the show who, constantly ask, can we get any of this? Can we claw any of this money back that's been stolen from us? Representative Kristen Robbins, so how have you been, and what are your plans between now and primary day? I'm curious how you're spending your time and anything you want to leave the listeners with this morning before I cut you loose.
Yeah, it's been a very busy summer. I'm retiring, so I'm working hard in my district to help the guy running for my seat. And also we have an open Senate seat in our area, so I've been involved in that and spending time with family and really focused on trying to help motivate people to get out and vote. That's the message. Republicans need to get out and vote, cast your ballot for the primary candidate of your choice. But then after the primary, we have to unite. As Ronald Reagan said, the road to socialism is through a divided Republican Party. So we have got to get out there and vote in the primary, and then we have to immediately turn and campaign like crazy for our Republican candidates.
Well, I know I speak for the listener of the show that your fight and your time serving is certainly going to be missed. So I appreciate the work that you've done and the work that you continue to do as well. And hopefully, whoever ends up replacing you in that seat will be able to put forward the same amount of effort that you have in fighting for the people of Minnesota. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much for what you've done for this state. And thank you so much for coming on the show this morning. And certainly do not be a stranger. You're welcome back at any time, Representative Kristen Robbins.
Thank you.
Before we wrap up the show today, let me get to a couple of clips as I look at the clock and it begins to wind down. I mentioned this earlier in the show. Appleton, Minnesota, a town of 1,400, preparing for the reopening of a private prison facility by Core Civic. It secured a 5-year contract with ICE to house up to 1,600 immigrant detainees. Now, the reopening is expected to bring jobs and economic benefits to some of the residents who are concerned, however, about the potential protests and the implications of the increased federal immigration detention. And I bring this up because of that very reason. This is a reopening of this facility that people in this region are excited about. For example, in the story that I have here from Channel 5, Ryan Grant runs the Minnesota Lumberyard, including both before and after. Core Civic closed the Prairie Correctional Facility back in 2010. He said it was pretty busy. He said about the business before the prison closed, and since they left, I feel that we've lost that. I'm looking forward to it myself. Anyone can see what he's talking about by just walking through the almost empty downtown area. Few businesses, fewer jobs, even less in the way of taxes to support city services. A lot of people they've left, that I understand. Over the years, the city has worked to get the correctional facility reopened. 9 years ago, it posed a petition at change.org asking for support of a federal grant that would have helped the correctional facility reopen. More than 700 people signed it. Grant said, it'll be nice to have them back living in town again. Of those who left after the prison closed. I bring all this up because this is going to be a place of protest and a point of contention. I jokingly said yesterday that, you know what, they really need to go and just start making the moat around the facility now because of the number of individuals that are going to be there protesting. And that's really unfortunate for the people of this community that were desperate to get this facility back reopened. With that, I'll close out on just a couple of clips from the debates yesterday. Angie Craig and Peggy Flanagan talking about the issue of immigration. First off, we'll go to Angie Craig's comments.
And so 40% of America's farm workers are undocumented. We've got to stop playing this as a political wedge issue, and we have to have a conversation. If somebody has been here, obeyed the law, worked on our family farms, we've got to give them a path to legal status in this country. We've got to stop attacking the immigrant communities across Minnesota and across America.
Echoing the same sentiment, here's Peggy Flanagan.
I think we can have an immigration system where we have secure borders, but we also have an immigration system that is grounded in safety and dignity and humanity and a pathway to citizenship for folks who have been here, who are law-abiding citizens or law-abiding folks who've been part of Minnesota. And the demonization of individuals right now is not good for Minnesota. And frankly, we can do a whole lot better.
Believe what they say when they say it. When they're talking about pathways to citizenship, they're talking about amnesty. It doesn't help when we have our own candidates talking about amnesty. I expect this coming from the left. But with the guests that we've had this morning, whether it was endorsed gubernatorial candidate Kendall Qualls, policy fellow here at American Experiment Matt Dean, and Kristen Robbins, who just joined us, they all echoed the same theme. We can keep this from happening, but it's going to require that we get out to vote and we get our friends and our family out to vote to stem this wave of Democrat socialists and really what comes down to Marxism and communism from going and grabbing hold in the country. I believe that the United States of America is resilient. And if the worst of the worst happens regarding these far leftist, anti-American candidates do win, we're going to see the devastation of what their policies are going to wreak. That will more than likely eventually bring about a wave of common sense policies and candidates in the future. Well, what kind of hardship will the country have to go through? What kind of devastation? How many lives ultimately will end up being lost if the individuals that have currently co-opted the Democrat Party actually are able to attain that power? It's not something that I want to risk. It's not something that I want my boys to have to go through. And when they get married and have kids, that they have to go through. We can stop this now, but it requires us to get engaged, for those that are running for office to make good, sound, conservative policy positions, to put their partisan bickering aside, and to make sure that the Republicans coalesce around, especially here in Minnesota, whoever those nominees are come Tuesday, even if it's not your person. And don't go and criticize and demonize your fellow Republican if they support a different candidate than you do. They have their reasons just like you are. We cannot eat our own if we're going to win this fight against this rising tide of Democrat socialism and communism that is grabbing hold here in this country. We'll certainly be here every single step of the way. If you missed any portion of today's show, check out the podcast. It'll be available shortly up on the MixLR app and where you listen to all podcasts. If you want to watch the replay of the show, you can do so if you head on over to Center of the American Experiment's Facebook or YouTube page. Tomorrow, it's a Freedom Friday. Katherine Johnson, Grace Keating, Representative Max Reimer, and RNC Committeeman A.K. Kamara, plus your comments to 612-584-4565 for a Freedom Friday. I already got a stack of stories, some fun items in the stack tomorrow. So hopefully we'll lighten things up a bit ahead of what will certainly be a contentious week next week. Thank you so much for hanging out today. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow morning starting at 6 a.m., and we'll close things out with some Zima Fizz. God bless, and I'll talk to you in the morning. Bye.
Static waves at dawn, a voice that lingers when night is gone. Twin cities hum with stories spun. Jon Justice rides the rising sun. Zima Fizz in a plastic cup. Star Wars dreams keep lifting him up. Costco aisles is sacred ground where neon shadows spin around. Embark on journeys in the stars, a galaxy of hope and scars. With every word